Do you ever ask yourself, how would my life be different if I had made different choices? Would I be happier? More wealthy? Here's a humorous novel that explores that question, venturing back to that magical time in the early 90s when grunge was taking over big hair bands. It was just when our hero, Amy Gare, began to face the real world. You Hawkeye fans just might enjoy the setting as well. Goodbye Def Leppard, I'll Miss Those Jeans by Steph Kramer can be found on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, and it's free for Kindle Unlimited subscribers. Casmium believes every young athlete deserves a shot at greatness. By making data analytics accessible and easy, they provide a new way for coaches and athletes to improve their game. Casmium's digital scoring app, all-in-one stats, and chart software enable teams to quickly and easily find new ways to strategize and harness the power of data. Join Casmium in revolutionizing the world of youth sports with tools that make a difference. Schedule a software demo or sign up today at Casmium.com. Casmium, where sports technology sparks victory. Brad Van Meter of State Farm proudly sponsoring our show here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. We appreciate Brad once again. If you need better coverage, and who doesn't, on all the major types of insurance, whether we're talking about auto insurance, life insurance, homeowners insurance, motorcycle insurance, boat insurance, whatever it is, give Brad and his awesome Hawkeye team a call. 515-256-6480 or visit Brad online at www.bradvanmeter.com. Again, that's Brad Van Meter at State Farm, his office down on Fleur Drive in Des Moines. Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson is proudly presented once again by Iowa Smokehouse. If you want a better quality snack for game day, or how about just any day of the week, check out what our friends down at Iowa Smokehouse are offering. They've been in business for decades, and they offer a great lineup sure to satisfy you and your family, your friends' snacking needs. Their beef jerky, their meat sticks, their steak bites, it's all great. It's all fresh. It's all tender. It's all delicious. And their ketchups, their barbecue sauces, their salsas. Tasting is believing. See how that's the case. Visit iowasmokehouse.com and use the code Hawkeyes. Again, that's iowasmokehouse.com. Use the code Hawkeyes for 15% off your order. Don't bother going to the store. Have Iowa Smokehouse deliver it right to your doorstep. iowasmokehouse.com. Use the code Hawkeyes for 15% off your order. Well, we're here, folks. Iowa getting the 31-14 win over the Minnesota Golden Gophers. The Hawkeyes bringing FLOYD back to his proper residency. FLOYD of Rosedale is back in Iowa City, or will be here following, I assume, a late-night bus drive home. But the Hawkeyes with a big second half, outscoring the Gophers 24-zip. 24-zip in the second half. Do the math. That's a pretty big second half offensively. And all of those points were offensive points. This is not like in past seasons when Iowa sometimes made its money on the scoreboard via special teams, via defense, fumbles, picks, all that. No, this was offense. This was rush offense. And that's been the theme throughout this 4-game stretch for the Hawkeyes. We're a third of the way through the season as we enter Iowa's first bye week. They get 2 this year due to how the schedule shapes up, how it was constructed, and they enter their first bye week at 3-1. Boy, I've got a lot of thoughts on the season and the complexity and the complexion now of where we're at. We are going to be joined in just moments by former Iowa offensive coordinator Don Patterson. Once again, Don is a delight, especially late on a Saturday night, because there's reason to celebrate, always reason to celebrate a win in a rivalry game and on the road. So many different takes at halftime, like so many different opinions. I had people flooding my text messages, my DMs with complaints and these just general statements and conclusions that we draw based on a sample here, a sample here, a sample here. Well, if we're going to play that game, let's draw conclusions based on the second half against Illinois State, the first quarter against Iowa State, the second half against Troy, and the second half against Minnesota. This team is not playing 4 quarters of good football, but they are playing good football in every single game. Okay? They are. That's just the reality of it. So you can make these general statements about how, not a playoff team, you're nuts. I don't care what you have to say as it relates to the playoff, frankly. You can say it. This is a call-in show. Everybody has a right to their opinion. But I'm going to state my opinion after this win. Iowa is absolutely alive for the college football playoff and for the Big Ten championship game. Whether you think they're deserving, whether you think this team is complete enough, balanced enough, that's your opinion. You have every right to it. I'm not going to say you're wrong about that. Do we really need to go through the schedule again? Do we really need to tell you why Iowa is still very much alive for these things? No one is claiming that Iowa is one of the 12 best teams in the country. They don't need to be. They don't need to be. They need to build a resume that the playoff committee will select, okay? And the playoff committee is going to have a hard time if this team's 11-1. They're in if they're 11-1, right? I know people are going to say there's no way on this green earth that they beat Ohio State. Okay, fine. I'm sure we'll talk about that. We've got a whole bye week to talk about it, and I know Kirk Ferentz is going to have those guys ready in 2 weeks. I think they're going to play better than they did 2 years ago against the Buckeyes. Am I predicting a win? I'm not. But they are alive right now, folks. And the dominance displayed in that second half on the ground, we've seen flashes all year. And what happens when Iowa finally puts together 4 quarters of that? That's the question. What happens? Or what happens when Iowa finally figures out how to throw the ball? Right? And we've seen flashes of that. We've seen flashes of it. Now, it's not been anything like what we've seen from the rush offense. It's been nothing like that. But we have seen flashes of it. And the passing game is better than it was last year. There's really no comparison. Yes, they still have 3 and outs. Yes, Cade makes awkward, uncomfortable decisions at times. I actually think Cade was okay tonight. The numbers are going to say he was, I don't want to say bad, but the numbers were very, 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 very underwhelming. But look at the scoreboard. Iowa in 2020 won 6 straight games and probably should have won 8. They should have won 8-0 in 2020 had they not lost late against Purdue and blown a 17-point lead against Northwestern, at least 7-1. They should have been 7-1 that year. And they did that with the Spencer Petras at quarterback that couldn't hit the broadside of a barn because they had a really, really good running game. You give credit to Brian Ferentz that year, but he had Tyler Goodson, Mekhi Sargent, Tristan Wirfs, Tyler Linderbaum, and all those guys up front. Was Tristan Wirfs on that team? Now I'm wondering if maybe he was gone after 2019. Linderbaum was on that team. That was a Cody Ince. Trying to think of who else was on that team. I'm going to go down a rabbit hole that I can't climb out of. Anyways, the point is they've done this before. Iowa is predicated on the run. They haven't ran the ball well in several years, but when they run the ball well, they win games. Because when you run the ball well and your defense is as good as it is and special teams is as good as it is, and by the way, Reese Dakin looked a lot better tonight, that is a breath of fresh air, and that is something that I expected after a real strong second half this past weekend against Troy. Let's go to our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. Before we do that, though, our RTI Threads player of the game, how can you not go with Caleb Johnson? 21 carries, 206 yards, 3 touchdowns. Everybody keeps saying I need to apologize to Caleb Johnson. Why do I need to apologize to Caleb Johnson? I called it like I saw it prior to the season beginning. And I think, personally, that the coaching staff, by anointing Kamari Moulton game 2, remember, Caleb Johnson was suspended half of game 1. He was available game 2. Kamari Moulton was still the starter on the depth chart. I think that was a little bit of a fire lit under Caleb Johnson, and I think Caleb Johnson has responded. He is playing like the all Big Ten running back that Iowa has needed for years. We always talk about the Wisconsin ideal. Whether we're talking Monty Ball, James White, Melvin Gordon, Agumba Wale, Clay, I don't care who we're talking about. Wisconsin's always had the guy. Iowa finally has the guy, right? And they have an offensive line to complement him. Offensive line's a big part of that. We're going to talk with Coach Patterson about that. We've been talking with Coach Patterson about that. But we continue to see each and every game, Caleb is developing confidence in different facets of the game that we'd never seen him really display. And even Liddell Betts acknowledged this a week ago when we chatted with him during a midweek press conference, that Iowa State was really the first time he'd seen in a game Caleb's ability to keep those legs moving, welcome contact. And right now he's seeing tight spaces. His burst is great. He's breaking tackles, and he's got great speed. When he gets to the second level, it's basically over. It's basically over. He is a dangerous, dangerous man right now, and he is our RTI Threads player of the game. RTI Threads proudly sponsoring this show and also sponsoring the likes of Aaron Graves, Jacob Gill, Carson Shire, Zach Lutmer. Have you gotten your merchandise yet from RTI Threads? If you have not, we're going to show you the website later in the show. We're going to be with you at least for the next couple, 2 to 3 hours here, folks. So get set for whatever you got. It was smart TV, tablet, phone. Maybe you're laying in bed, fall asleep to it. I don't really care. But hang tight because this is going to be a fun show. 2.5 hours. But we're going to go through the website, rtithreads.com, later. And we're going to talk about these apparel lines. But check it all out at RTI Threads, maybe on a second tab as we talk about this game. The Hawkeyes beating the Gophers. But again, RTI Threads, thank you to RTI Threads up in Sioux City, the Sioux City area, for sponsoring another edition of Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson. Let's go to our first caller of the day. And he's always here early. Let's reward him for his diligence. James, welcome to our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. How you doing today, sir?
A lot better in the second half than I was in the first half. But
are you about to apologize to me? I demand an apology from you because you were.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm a very.
You were
negative,
one of. Let me say.
I'm a very negative person. I'm a very negative person when it comes to the first half.
Do I need to mute you? Let me say what I'm going to say. You were flooding my DMs at halftime about how you literally said the O-line stinks. I'm going to call out everybody who flooded my DMs during this show. You told me the O-line stinks. Now take it back. Apologize to the O-line like I have to apologize to Caleb Johnson.
I apologize that I was wrong. I'm a very negative person, and that does come back to bite me sometimes. So I'm not going to deny that, though.
We can all admit it.
Yeah.
I appreciate your humility and your modesty, James. I do appreciate it.
No, yeah, I admit that. But the second half was something I don't think I've seen in a long time. Obviously, it's from offensive-wise, just like they were running the ball so well. They really didn't pass at all in the second half, because they were running that well. They didn't really need to because they just kept getting whatever they wanted on the ground, so you didn't really even need to throw the ball. But
absolutely, 100%.
But yeah, it was good to see, and I know KJ kind of came up limping, but he looked fine. He was smiling afterwards on that one play. He came up limping a little bit on sound, but he was smiling and everything. He seemed fine. So, and he got a bye week, so hopefully whatever he has, if he does have anything,
and here's what we can all agree on. I hope here's what we can all agree on. Regardless of people being critical of me for at the beginning of the season saying, hey, I don't know who the best running back is. It might be Kamari Moulton. It might be LaShawn Williams. Regardless of that, I'm fine with taking that criticism, but nobody in their right mind at that point, nobody in their right mind can say that Caleb Johnson had proven to be a workhorse. He just hadn't, because there had been too many games, and you've known this, James, because you watch Iowa football like we all do. There had been too many games where Caleb Johnson was on the seesaw, on the roller coaster, and he'd have a great performance, he'd have a bad performance. And hey, he's turned into a complete back, but he was not this way last year. Credit to Liddell Betts. Liddell Betts deserves as much credit as Tim Lester does and as George Barnett does with the O-line, because I think Liddell has really changed this running back group, and they've needed a change because it's been a struggle to get to the point where they're at now. But hey, they've found a way. all these offensive linemen, they're in their final years at Iowa. Most of them, they're in their final year at Iowa. But they see something clicked, and it's complemented by having a guy in Caleb Johnson who's probably going to end up first team All Big Ten. And I don't know if he's going to end up in the Heisman race. Right now, he's leading the country, and he ain't going to be trailing. He's going to lead the country at the end of the night. I don't know how many games or rushers are out there. He had over 200 yards tonight after he was leading the country heading into this week. Right now, he is going to be on Heisman watch list, whether you agree with it or not. I'm not anointing him as a Heisman candidate, but he is on watch list. He should be on watch list. His numbers speak for themselves.
Definitely, but that also shows you, like, in every fantasy show, like, you never know how season's going to go, right? Like, at the beginning of the season, you never know. And I'm not disagreeing with you in the fact that you did say Kamari early in the year, but that's also because you don't know, right? Early in the year, we didn't get enough looks at running backs to tell who was the best running back in each room, or who's the best running back in that room, if that makes sense, right? Like, Caleb played at half, and yes, he looked good in that half, but also he played a half against the FCS team. So how could you tell he was the best running back after half against the FCS team? If that makes sense. Now, obviously, he is, but I mean, like, at that point, I get how you couldn't tell because it was only half against the FCS team. And yeah, he looked good, but it was also an FCS team.
Let's go back 2 years ago, James, to the game at Purdue. He looked great.
Yeah.
He looked great. He put up, 200-plus yards in that game? The difference was he's getting to 200 yards in a totally different fashion now, and he's doing it game after game after game. That is
it's being consistent. It's not like one game, then he's not there for like 4 games, and then another game, it's been 4 in a row. So it kind of does show you that he is there. One thing that does scare me a little bit is the drops by receivers that aren't. And I know some of those passes were bad. Some of those passes were bad. I'm not gonna disagree. Some of those
No,
passes
no,
weren't
no,
bad.
no. They were drops.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
were
Well, I don't
drops.
know. There were drops, and it's not good that they drop wide receivers, especially the only guy who seems to be catching. I think we said this before. The only person who seemed to be catching is Gill, and everybody else kind of seemed to drop. Reese had a couple drops. I think Terrell had a drop or two at least.
Well, let's remember one thing, and then I do want to move on. And if you want to come on later with
No,
Don,
yeah,
because Don is
you're
waiting in
good.
the queue, James,
Yeah,
you're absolutely welcome to hang out in the queue, and we'll get back to you. But let me just say this: drops had not been a problem until tonight.
yeah.
Reese had a drop last game, but I mean, Caleb Brown's gotten very few targets. I see Alex Springman's in our queue. He'll probably bring up Caleb Brown. Terrell had gotten few targets. Weejan's gotten few targets. They got to spread the ball around more. That's a continuous thing, a continuous emphasis that has to be made throughout the next 2 weeks. And one final thing I'll say to you, James, and I'm going to say it to everybody. I've been saying this since August, and you know this, James. What did I tell you about the pass offense? What did I say in August? Everybody was excited, right? Cautiously optimistic. But what have I said about the rush offense versus the pass offense since preseason?
I think we knew the rush offense would be better than the pass offense just because you could tell early.
And I told everybody, I said, James, you are going to see a very one-dimensional offense in the first month of the season. If they can survive all 4 games and get to October 4-0, terrific, because I think they have a shot after the bye week of getting that pass offense clicking. Unfortunately, they dropped a game against Iowa State. That lessens the margin. But as it relates to the effectiveness of the offense, I'm not surprised by where we're at. Actually, I think they're a little ahead of schedule in some regards because I didn't think the run game would be this good. I didn't think they'd have a guy like Caleb Johnson, a workworse. So,
Yep,
James,
definitely. I'll get back to you. Just enjoy the night. Thank you for the show. And I was a little negative early, but I appreciate you calling me out. Sometimes everybody needs to be called out. So,
James, hang around. We'll get you back with Coach Patterson here a little bit. All right, folks. Iowa postgame with none other than Coach Don Patterson. If you want to call our Iowa Smokehouse line, you're going to have to wait as it relates to the phone line. But our StreamYard link is in our description, and we do have some spots open. So go ahead and click on the StreamYard link if you want to talk to myself and Coach Patterson. We welcome the man of the hour, the man of the next couple hours, or 3 hours. Don is in for the long haul tonight. And Don, Peppa the Pig is back in Iowa City. I shouldn't say that. Floyd is back in Iowa City. Don, it's always a good night when you beat the Gophers, especially a second half in which Iowa outscored Minnesota 24-0. Looked like a completely different game. It's amazing how momentum can change in a game like this. And it didn't happen with big plays. And there were a couple on the ground. They certainly weren't through the air. What changed at halftime, Don?
I think this, Corey. I don't know that I've ever seen a better example of one group of coaches out coaching another group of coaches. I say that because we had great halftime adjustments on both offense and defense. We clearly changed up the way we were going to play. We did a great job of forcing the issue in the second half. And a couple of my last entries, we did not flinch, but they did. That was when we went ahead 31-14. As you know, 17-point lead, that's the magic number, really. Requires 3 scores. We scored on all 4 of our second half possessions in a row, the first 4, I should say. And then I made another entry, and I bet you'll agree. I couldn't help but notice PJ had no answers. I don't think PJ said a word to anyone for the last quarter.
You know what? What's funny is I don't like that NBC crew. I'll just admit that. I have nothing against some of the people. Like, I have nothing against Michael Robinson. I think he's really good at his job. And frankly, the guy, what's the guy's name? Todd Blackledge, is that his name?
Right.
He's fine. I think their rules guy is kind of lousy compared to the other rules guys in different networks. Frankly, I like the guy from the CW last night more than I like the guy for NBC. But Don, I didn't think they showed PJ more than once or twice in that second half, and the camera was all over him in the first.
Right.
And you're absolutely right. They showed him a little late, and he didn't have any responses. And I want to get to play calling in a second. We've got a couple of super chats that I want to get because they got these super chats in early. We appreciate that. If you want your comment on the screen and addressed in a somewhat quick fashion, we can't guarantee immediate response. But Kevin, thank you for the super chat. Great to get the win, he says. Much better second half. But why do we only force the opposing defense to defend 20 yards of the field? Did we have any passes more than 15 yards down the field? Boy, I love this question. Because, Don, you and I had a conversation at halftime. I asked you, Don, I said, what does Iowa do? Because Minnesota's sending 5. I thought sometimes 6. You told me more often than not 5. They were sending an extra guy. And it's hard. Even though you have 5 offensive linemen, the center is at a disadvantaged position to help and pick up that 5th man. It's difficult. And sometimes you don't know where the pressure is coming from. So I asked you, Coach, what do you do in this situation? Because Cade's not getting time. Not that Cade was great in the first half, but his numbers were really impeded by the pass rush. And I believe you said something along the lines of maybe you find a man beater. And Iowa hasn't had many individuals that I would consider to be man beaters. They really didn't do that in the second half, but I thought there were little adjustments from Tim that we saw, especially in that first drive of the second half, that included a throw on first down on the first play of the drive that I thought really changed the complexity, and it just put Minnesota back on their heels a bit.
Well, let me say this, Corey. Don't think that a man beater is a play that's always going to produce a touchdown. When I talk about man beaters, I simply mean plays that give the defensive play caller a lot of reason to question whether or not he should continue doing it. Let me give you a couple of examples. I had to find them here because I wrote them down as they happen. Maybe they're a little further back. Let me find it. Bear with me. Minnesota plays man free. Here's a good example. 3rd and 6 on the -31. Probably still in the third quarter. Minnesota plays man free. We throw an inside fade to RVZ.
Great example.
Plus 18.
Great
That's
example.
a man beater. Why is that a man beater? Because we got an inside receiver that's running a fade route versus a safety. Not a corner, but a safety. It's a better matchup. Kate put the ball up nice and high. Our guy played the ball. Their guy didn't, right?
And an undersized safety, right? A guy who's disadvantaged from a height position.
Sure. So you look for mismatch, and that was a mismatch, at least in terms of height. That's a good example. Here's another good example. It gets away from the passing game, but just give you an idea of what I'm talking about. I don't believe we ran our counter a single time in the first half. That was a 40-yard touchdown. Our counter. We pulled the guard and the tight end. Remember that?
Yeah.
Not in the first half we didn't. Second half we did. One thing we did not get away from, we came back to it more than once, is naked. We ran naked into the boundary for a nice gainer. And it wasn't the simple front side naked. It was the tight end who's a wing back on the other side of the formation, coming all the way underneath. It's a very deceptive play. Obviously, he might get dropped in coverage, right? Because he lined up on the other side of the ball. That's just a few of the examples. Good job by Winston on the reverse. That was a good call. We did a lot of things to keep him on balance. 100 on the 9. First and goal at the 9-yard line. We faked a fly sweep and went Q-sweep for 4 yards.
That made me nervous. That play made me a little nervous.
Yeah, the ball was up floating in the air a little too long, but thankfully we just did a nice job of filling the ball, and we were okay.
So, Don, how would you address this statement from this question from Kevin about forcing the defense to defend more than 20 yards of the field? Do you still feel like there's a need to figure out a way to push the ball downfield, even if it doesn't always result in completions?
Absolutely. And I realize some of our guys are not very capable of scaring a team deep downfield. But there are other ways to do it. It's not always just based on speed. I will go on record as saying, I think Caleb Brown can scare people down the field. I think Winston can scare people down the field too. Both those guys run well enough. And beyond that, it doesn't have to always be a fast guy to scare people over the top. A simple double cut with a great route runner does it. We had guys like Billy Happel and Scott Helverson way back in the 80s. They weren't that fast, but after you started to wear teams out with underneath cuts, sometimes those guys went over the top simply because they were such good route runners. You know, that they bit on the short route and they were beaten deep by a guy that's not that fast, but he understood how to run routes. It wasn't just a simple thing to do. You also made a point of flashing your hands. As you broke on an out route, you flashed your hands in anticipation of the ball. There wasn't going to be a ball coming, but he doesn't know that. If you flash your hands, he'll turn and look for the ball, at which point you got him beat over the top. Little stuff like that does add up.
Thank you, Kevin, for the super chat. Do appreciate that. Brian adds with the super chat. Thank you, Brian. KJ and O-line improved the running capability yet again. Huge props to Cade for being out front on Caleb's touchdown, cheering on Sully for his reps. I believe in our defense to keep improving. Don, let's real quickly before we get to our next caller, can we talk a little bit about that play? Because the average football fan sees and they see a lot of linemen going right, and basically Terrell Washington, Cade McNamara going left. And maybe the thing that went unnoticed is how good of a job Jacob Gill was doing down that left side of the field and holding his man up, created the touchdown on third down, big third down too, from Caleb Johnson. Talk about that play.
Well, the bottom line, misdirection needs to be part of your offense. And the ways everyone thinks about, they always think about a reverse or some kind of counterplay maybe, but there are other ways to run misdirection too. I know it sounds silly, but we had a play years ago, and we simply told Ronnie Harmon, Ronnie, go ahead and start right, and everybody's going to block like it's going right, except we want you to remember, you do such a good job of putting your foot in the ground and changing direction, it's just a built-in reverse. You're the only guy that's going to show reverse. Nobody else. We're going to block it to the right, but we're telling you now, we want you to put your foot in the ground and run away from the blocking scheme. And teams that pursue really hard to the ball, that's a good way to beat them. And that's what happened on that very play.
Did you feel like, because this is from my perspective, that drive, first drive of the second half, was the best called drive Tim has had so far here? Is that?
I think so. There's so many of them. There are more than a few. Let me see if I can just run through some of them. We were lucky. Outside's over 17. Late hit puts us on the plus 15. That was a short drive to tie it up. Here's a good one. Second and 10 on the plus 15. Will right to a stringer for a questionable catch. They end up ruling no catch, but it looked like it. By the way, it looked like again. Cade threw it. One reason Cade threw it, a stringer was playing the ball. Their defender had his back turned.
Good throw.
It's a time to. The guy might as well scream out, why don't you go ahead and throw it my way, because I don't even know the ball's coming. The ball went right over his ears, and with a little bit of luck, we'd have had a catch taking us down to the 1 yard line. Third down and 10 on the plus 15. We cross them up with the K. Johnson TD run. That's the play you're talking about, where we started right, put on our brakes, came back left. We're blocking back like always. When Washington blocked back, the edge guy thought, I'm going to defeat Washington. You might recall Washington got outweighed probably by 30 pounds. Washington got knocked on his butt to some degree, but that defender fought across Washington's face because he was convinced the ball was up inside of Washington's block. Well, in fact, the ball went wider than that, didn't it? And there were two people out wider than Washington's block. It was number 12 and number 2. They were the only two.
Let's go to our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson. Who's on the line?
Let's go to our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. Thank you.
Hello, you're on the air.
Hey, can you hear me?
We got you.
Hey, Corey, this is Randy here, Texas.
Hey, Randy.
How you doing? Again, I just love this show. It just keeps everybody outside the area of Iowa up to date with everything going on. So it's a must watch for us. 2 questions. When Kirk Ferentz, sat out that game, and maybe it was somewhere along the line, but why wasn't Phil Parker the head coach, for that game? I just assumed that,
well,
he'd be the guy.
All I can say is Seth Wallace is the assistant head coach, Don, and he's making $1 million a year, not much less than Phil is. Phil's got a whole side of the football to worry about in the defense, and Seth has a group in the linebackers that are pretty self-sufficient, and he assists Phil with the defense. But Don, can you give a response to Randy on that question?
I have reason to believe that, no surprise to anybody that follows Iowa football, Seth has been a big part of our defense. Of course, what Phil Parker knows, I think it's safe to say Seth has observed Phil and learned from Phil. So is it any surprise that Seth now is an attractive candidate to be a defensive coordinator somewhere else? I know for a fact he was pursued by a Big Ten school that'll remain nameless this past season. One reason he didn't take the job is because he became assistant head coach and he got a significant pay raise. That's what you got to do to keep good people. Coach for always said, if you got a good coach, you can't do enough for him. If you got a bad coach, you can't get rid of him soon enough. And obviously, Kirk sees a lot of value in Seth, and so do the players, and that's one reason we still have Seth on our side. But that's precisely how he ended up with the title, I think. Kirk saying, I don't want to lose you. If I have to give you another title, I'll do it. And by the way, I'm giving you this title because I think you're on your way to becoming a head coach. And, of course, that's good training for Seth to be able to work one game without Kirk on the sideline.
Right. Then my second question is kind of for Coach Patterson. Like last year when we were all trying to figure out who was to be the offensive coordinator, it was, nothing but a list of names that were well known. And then Tim Lester came out of nowhere. And, nobody ever saw that coming. And of course, Coach was able to get on the phone and, get some background and stuff on the guy. And obviously, I think the guy's excellent. I think, he's just doing a great job. And that's got to be a tough position to come into just because of, Brian Ferentz. And that was probably, a hard thing for Kirk. So, I guess it would take a certain personality, to come in and, do your job and still be respectful of Brian's, position there. But then also going back, asking Coach Patterson, when you bring coaches in, and they could be really, really talented what they do, but if they don't get along with anybody else or they make it, how important is it the coaching staff all works together and there's cohesiveness and there's not somebody rubbing somebody the wrong way the whole time? And with that, I'll just let Coach answer that for you. I love your show.
Thank you for the call, Randy. We do appreciate your calls always.
One word answer, I think it's critical. If I had to use one word, it would be the word critical. We tell the players, and the coaches are the same way. We tell the players, this is not about you. It's not about anybody in this group. It's not about me either. It's not about Kirk Ferentz. It's about the team. If you don't understand that, we're not going to get along. Same thing applies to the coaching staff. I've always said it this way. It's amazing how much you can accomplish when no one is concerned with who gets the credit. And that's what great units are all about. That's what a great military unit's all about. That's what a great football team's all about too. No one's concerned with who gets the credit because the greater good is simply the outcome of the game. That's all that matters. It doesn't matter how much playing time you get or how many yards you ran for or how many snaps you had on your side of the ball. The only thing that matters is that scoreboard. And if you don't understand that, I'll say it this way, Corey. You've heard me say it before. A wise old coach, and I was the wise old coach before I was done because I was lucky enough to coach a long time. After a big win, I'm looking around the locker room to see who's not happy because that's a really bad sign. That suggests that player is all about himself. He's not about the team. And there are exceptions to that. If a guy had a horrible game as a receiver and dropped 2 passes, he's relieved that we won the game in spite of his 2 drops. But obviously he's got to get over it because he might be the guy that wins the game the next weekend. He should be relieved that his teammates made up for his poor play in the case of a couple of drops. But the bottom line, it's got nothing to do with how many snaps you had. And it really shouldn't have. You should feel thankful to your teammates if you play poorly and we win. But the bottom line, be sure you never ever have that crazy notion that it's all about you. Because if it is, we're not going to get along. And I'm going to let you know, I observed you not being happy with the outcome of the game And I have reason to believe it's because you think that you're getting the short end of the stick from your coach. And if you think that way, you're wrong. That's how I feel. Coaches are paid to make great decisions. You've heard me say, Corey, in my way of thinking, some of the very best ADs I ever knew were former coaches. Why? Because coaches have to make hard decisions. Coaches have to let coaches go. Coaches have to bench players that they wish they didn't have to bench. But it's all about what's in the best interest of the team. That's all that matters.
Let's go to our Iowa Smokehouse call line. By the way, if you call the phone line, you're going to be put on hold. So have a different device, put it on hold. Don't hang up, because if you hang up, you go back to the end of the line if you call back. So just hang tight. You're not going to be able to hear the show when you're on the phone line. You can hear the show if you're on StreamYard. So we got several callers waiting on hold in our queue. We'll start our Iowa Smokehouse call line. Pat is here. Pat, welcome to the show.
Hey, man, first time, long time. Love the show that you guys do because I met David Eichel this, off season. He's one of the only guys that actually, I asked him about you. Respects the hell out of you, Corey. Weird thing, though, what I'm, getting very frustrated with this year is everyone's saying Tim Lester hasn't called great games. I think he's called hell of a games. We're just not getting the quarterback play that I think that we deserve in a way. But also in the same instance as well, one thing I get very frustrated with our quarterbacks, when we call an audible for a run play, why don't they ever just fake to a receiver, give him a bullcrap call, move of the hand? You know what I mean? Hey, we're changing up this pass route or something like that. Then also with the same thing, when we look at the two halves today, was the first half I know people are saying hey, maybe we need to get rid of Kirk and all this. Was the first half a Kirk half? Then the second half was hey, Lester's running the show. Now we're actually running things differently.
Don, do you have a response to either one of those comments?
Tim called him the first half and the second half. I just think they adjusted the way the game was being played out and made great halftime adjustments on both sides of the ball.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, also, too, watching the game, too, the thing I get mad at, I'm also a gambler. So, when I looked at this game early, I thought we should have just handled Minnesota. They play right in their hands. Their quarterback's not mobile. We have a really good defense. They only have one good receiver. So when we play them right, Phil Parker's the man. We can take away their receiver, make Brosmer throw to their off guys. We can live with that. But also at the same time, why didn't we just Caleb Johnson? Here you go, dominate, which he did later. I agree with that, but it's just more frustrating because we look at it from a gambling perspective. We should have just owned that, from the go.
Well, they were Don. You respond to that. Why? Minnesota's making adjustments as well. All I'll say is,
well, sorry. The only reason I'm cutting you off, I think athlete for athlete, we are way better than Minnesota.
Well, they won by 17.
No, I know that, but I'm saying we are just a better team in my perspective. There's no reason why. When I look at this too, I'm a longtime Hawkeye fan. I understand, hey, man, this is either the game where it's 10-10 in the fourth quarter, or we're up 42. But for some reason, I think we should be up 42 from the get-go.
Well,
yeah, I'm hopeful. I know.
Good Minnesota defense. Don, can you attest to that?
They're pretty solid. Last time I checked, they shut out their last two opponents. I realized that wasn't Ohio State and who else comes to mind? Texas, I guess. Yeah, Michigan. That was a funny game today. I found myself conflicted. It wouldn't have bothered me entirely if SC beat them. On the other hand, I'm thinking I don't want SC to feel like they can come in and
Yeah.
and run the show either. So
I don't
in the
think
end,
either one of them and their fans on both sides that bug the heck out of me. But
yeah.
anyways,
And,
I mean, I do think what you said at the get-go, Don, holds a lot of water, that this wasn't a poorly called first half, but it was a game in which it was real close at halftime. And the question was, Iowa was going to get the ball to start the second half. And so many times, I hate to beat up on Brian Ferentz, but I'm going to beat up on Brian Ferentz for a second, because there were so many times, I feel like, over the last 3 years that we all said the same things. We said, what halftime adjustments are going to be made? There have to be halftime adjustments made. And more often than not, the average fan, Don,
yeah, hard time recognizing what they might have been.
Yeah, what changed? Nothing
Right.
changed. You threw
Well,
for 30. Now, Cade didn't come out and throw for 200 yards in the second half, but as you highlighted at the get-go, it was a very, very fine-tuned series of adjustments from Tim Lester in that offensive playbook.
And part of those adjustments related to our passing game, such as the inside fade to Vanderzee, and such as what other ones come to mind? Fly sweep to Gopher 9 yards. That's a good call. That's not the passing game, but the naked was a good call. With the tight end coming from the other side of the formation, I'm going to overlook them unless I actually go down the list. There's a lot of them. Inside fade to RVZ was 18 yards. That was on 3rd and 6. Our counter for a touchdown. That's another great call. I don't think we saw a single one in the first half. There was another game where we ran our counter for the first time in the second half. I believe it was game 1.
So real quick, let me just adjust, and then Pat, if you have any final comments before I let you slide. Kevin in the chat. So actually put the money where your mouth is here. If you feel that confident, don't say you're going to donate $300 to the podcast. How about you donate $1,000 to the podcast when Iowa makes the Big Ten championship or the playoffs? Because you and I both know when you say Iowa will not, you are making a definitive statement, and you are confident in your statement, or at least that's the perception you're giving off. So put a bigger amount on that. You can say, I had multiple people. Our good friend Kyle. I'm going to be hard on Kyle this evening, Don, and I'll say why here in a little bit. But he's one of the people that was flooding my queue at halftime about how Iowa was done and they're not making the playoffs and they're, I don't care. All right. I don't care, because they are still in the race, and it's not just about top to bottom quality. It's about schedule. It's about schedule makeup. It's all these things. So we're going to talk big picture. We'll continue to talk about, especially in the bye week, I'm sure. But Kevin, if you're that confident, I'd be happy to accept your $1,000 donation when Iowa is in the 12-team playoff or in the Big Ten team, whichever one. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if you're that confident in it, don't just say 300. Anyways, Pat, anything else?
Corey, if that happens, I'll put 500 for both of us. I do not care what Kevin says. Like, what's funny though too is I have so much more respect for you two, because you guys always come here after like the good weeks, the bad weeks, and all that. And what just frustrates the hell out of me is that you guys are actually seeing the progression of this football team rather than just like week to week. Like, honestly, we're in the driver's seat right now. And what makes me so mad, Lester's offense is so working. People are just confused because, we're not seeing points. But we have open people. Like, if you're worried about the passing game, it's there. Like, there's open receivers. We're going to be there in a couple of years. But the problem is, I just don't know if Lester's going to be around.
Well, I think you'd be more concerned with, is Kirk going to be around? But
I'm one of those weird people. I just don't know.
It's going to take a lot for. I know that Tim is, resurrecting an offense that was dead last in the Power 5 and dead last in the country in the FBS. But it's going to take a while for Tim to be on, these big boards for better jobs than Iowa. That's what.
God, I hope not, because I love everything we're seeing. I love having open people downfield. I just think too, once he takes over a little bit, we get better recruits. People are going to be quiet. And I honestly think Iowa's a top 15 job as a head coach. So once Kirk leaves, if we don't go out and actually go get someone, I'll be very shocked.
Well, Pat, we appreciate the call, sir. And I've got you down for 500 when Iowa makes the game, one of the 2 games, and I got Kevin down for 3. So
Don't worry, I'll follow you on Twitter. I'll honor that.
all right. Thank you, Pat. Good stuff. All right. Moving along here, we've got a super chat here to get to from Erica. Thank you, Erica. Is Coach P going to wear a cowboy hat tonight? Floyd is going home. The boat sunk. I'm not going to read the hashtag because I don't think I like the hashtag. I actually don't know what the hashtag means, but I don't want to guess either. No cowboy hat for Don. You'll wear a cowboy hat, though, if Iowa makes a 12-team playoff, right?
For that matter, how about a win over Ohio State? I'll find somebody I have to wear them.
I'll you might be getting me in a boots and spurs if they beat Ohio State, Don. Thank you for the super chat, Erica. And James, Floyd looks malnourished. Poor guy. Thank you for the super chat, James. R. Levis. You think this is Will Levis's dad? R. Levis says the O-line does stink, though. The O-line doesn't stink, though. I think he meant doesn't. Just at pass blocking. As we saw in quarter 2, if the run game isn't working, we have a bottom 5 in the country O-line.
Not true.
Just going to roll my eyes. I appreciate the super chat, but it's just not accurate. I don't know how do you respond to that, Don, besides just not true? I mean, it's just not accurate. It's not true.
I'm not even going to dignify it with a response.
Well, how often was Minnesota sending a 5th guy?
A lot.
Yeah, a lot.
You asked me that at halftime. I gave you the same answer, didn't I? A lot. And here's what people don't understand. They might say, well, you got 5 linemen. You can block all 5 of them. Last time I checked, the center has to snap the ball in the gun. And he's at a disadvantage to be able to block anyone. Consequently, in general, pass protection means the center works with one of those guards to block a down player and protect 2 linebacker as well. In other words, the center always has help from one guard to the other. That's the basic way to block. So the bottom line, the 5 linemen are responsible for 4 guys that we're pretty confident are going to rush. That 5th guy, whoever he might be, invariably he needs to be blocked by a tight end or more likely by the lone running back. Pass protection is part of the drill. In rare cases, we'll tell the back, you're out without any protection responsibility, at which point if that 5th guy comes, we have to do what we refer to as throwing hot. We don't have anybody to block the guy. The ball's got to come out right now. And that requires some work, but certainly our guys understand when they're hot.
So real quick, Minnesota Dave, he's in the private chat, and he says, if you can put me on as soon as possible, that would be great. Minnesota Dave, I will put you on as soon as possible. However, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and we had a 10th caller a second ago. So I am not going to – I cannot put you ahead of everybody else that called in and has been waiting on hold. I'm sorry. But thank you for the suggestion. I do appreciate it, and I do appreciate you calling in. Let's go to our next caller. We have got Eric, who has been waiting, and it looks like – Eric, do I have 2 devices for you? I hope I'm not going to hear an echo here. Eric?
You do, because
okay. I don't hear an echo, though. I think you're good, sir.
Hold on. Let me kill
By the way, this is our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. Thought I'd add that in real quick. Welcome to the show, Eric.
Hey, thank you very much. First off, great victory. Little tenuous in the first half, as we all know. Seems to be the tale of the season so far. But I can't think of a better team or a better time for us to have a bye week.
I agree.
Collect. Hey, we're 3-1. What has happened has happened. But going to Columbus, let's just regroup. We'll figure out fundamentals, communication, all of that, and we'll be okay. What happens there is going to be fine. If the previous caller had voiced his frustrations, and I get it, but Coach Patterson knows this. that Minnesota defense was lathered up. They were ready to roll, and they were going downhill. All right. So it seems like I'm talking slowly, so there might be a delay. But they were really lathered up. And I think it was in the second series, we decided not to run to number 92 side, right? Because he was just long and lean and powerful. So we made a smart decision. So the coaches are doing the best they can. The players are. Hey, they had this kid from New Hampshire. That's fine. He had a nice little first half. And then all of a sudden, second half, you're going to play big boy football. And that's what happened, truly. And we got things going. We did what Iowa does. We made adjustments, and we just stepped on it. That's really, in my mind, as much frustration as you would have first half, early second half. We're kind of used to this. So this is a perfect time.
The one thing we're used to, though, Eric, let me just say this. One thing Iowa fans are not really accustomed to is seeing their team come out in the second half of any Big Ten game and score 24 points, 24 true offensive points. So that's a breath of fresh air. They win games, but they don't normally run away on the road.
100%.
So this has feelings of, I brought it up at the outset, 2020. Remember when they went up to Minnesota and they ran through Minnesota and Kirk used all his timeouts at the end of that game? Yeah. They did it on the ground. So I'm not saying it's going to be the same result as 2020. And ironically enough, in 2020, that was the COVID year, they lost a couple games early. Iowa lost one game early this year. They ended up not losing another one after that 0-2 start, ironically enough. So, but I agree with that.
Look at it this way. Iowa ran for, I believe, 272 yards. Okay, passed for 63 and won 31-14 on the road against a heated rival. Now, in the last 4 weeks or the first 4 weeks of the season, Iowa has played 2 heated rivals, and they're 3-1. Okay, I understand that they lost in Iowa City.
Correct.
This doesn't make up for it.
No.
But you got to keep things in perspective.
Yeah.
I can't say that they'll be fine. And I can't say there were a couple times there where I'm like, Phil, what are you doing? Okay, it's fine. But we survived it. 2 weeks off. And we go to Columbus. All right.
Absolutely. And I keep referring back to my statement about the passing game. I told everybody if the passing game is going to get there, it's going to get there in October.
Well,
and I stand by that because of when the bye week is placed, and they're going to be tested at Ohio State. And in order to win that game, they're going to have to throw, I think. They're going to have to throw. And
100%.
So trial by fire in a sense, and then you get a game at Washington at home that I think it's a vulnerable Washington team. I think we got a shot at seeing, that's my bold prediction. We will see a much improved pass offense in that game against Washington. And I'm kind of going on a limb, but Don, is that a feasible prediction to make? Can the bye week be a catapulting, have that sort of an effect? This team's got to be feeling pretty good going back to Iowa City, which should ignite a strong bye week series of practices.
Corey, you've heard me say before, think about it this way. Imagine a normal schedule where you have another game next Saturday. You finish one game. Let's assume the kickoffs are at the same time. Well, at the end of that game that was played today, you got 165 hours to get ready for the next one. That's happening next Saturday at that same time. Well, we have an advantage in preparing for Ohio State. I'm assuming Ohio State has a game next Saturday. I don't know that. We need to check. They do. Okay. Well, that's an advantage for us because we're going to be working 2 weeks on them. And I promise you, they're not looking ahead to us this particular week. They're getting ready for the next opponent. I'm assuming it's a Big Ten opponent. I don't even know who it is.
They're playing Oregon.
Yeah, I believe they're going to split
At Oregon. At Oregon.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember that. It's
At
got
Oregon, no West.
And who do they play after Iowa? Do you know, Eric?
No, they play Oregon after Iowa.
Okay, who does Ohio
in
State
Eugene.
play this week?
In Eugene. Oh, I don't know who they play this week. I don't know.
All right.
It's
I'll
not.
find that.
That's what I'd like to know. If somebody can verify they got a game next Saturday.
They play
I would
Michigan,
imagine they do. I don't.
Michigan State.
Michigan State.
Yeah. All right.
and it is in
They're gonna
Michigan.
Okay.
Michigan
Well,
State,
Lansing.
Iowa, Oregon, and then they're going to play Nebraska. Maybe have a week off, and then they play another tough opponent. So Ohio
yeah, I
State.
just want to focus on the next 2
schedule's gonna be
weeks.
tough.
My point is, we're going to be working a lot on fundamentals this week.
Yep.
That's what the players will know. What the players will not be aware of is we're working also as coaches in preparation for Ohio State. Now, maybe they'll hold off to introduce a lot of stuff until the game week, which is still a week away. But I can promise you the coaches are going to be working night and day this week, getting ready for Ohio State.
And they'll do a lot of self-sabotage. I mean, they will. They'll just sit there and say, okay, we've had – it breaks up pretty nicely because you've had a quarter of the season. Okay. So we've had 2 rivalries. So where are we at? We've done some good things. We've done some bad things. We haven't strung it together, which everyone was hoping that would happen with Minnesota. It kind of did in the first quarter. We lost in the second quarter, but we got the last 2 quarters. Now we have 3 quarters, right? So I understand, Coach. That's what we're going to push to. And so, look, I don't predict anything. I just have been watching this for a long time. And to your point, once we get to October, right, and we're a developmental team, then all of a sudden, let's see if it works. It may not work against Ohio State. They're pretty good. But after that, let's find out. And where the chips fall, they may. But I was as frustrated with not making plays as anyone. But we've got to sit here and look and beyond the big picture. Just understand what you've seen for the lifetime of your fanhood of Iowa. This is what Kirk is, what he's built. We've got a good culture, good coaching. Let's go. Next 2 weeks, let him settle it up. That's it.
Well, Eric, we appreciate your call, sir, and hopefully we'll talk to you after an Ohio State win.
I hope so.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate the call from Eric. Good stuff and a positive attitude as we head into a really pivotal day, a few days off. I mean, off relatively speaking. There's a lot of work that goes on during a bye week, Don. We'll talk about that at the tail end of our show. Certainly a lot of work that goes into a bye week. Super chat here from Brian. Thank you, Brian. Huge props to Tim. Speaking of Coach Lester, he's doing what he can with what he has. Now, thank you for the super chat, Brian. The question has been asked. I saw Seth in the chat earlier, and I know Caleb Brown's usage is going to get brought up again. After tonight, seeing him without a single catch, did he have maybe 1 target? My question is, okay, I pushed back a little bit last week on that discussion regarding the claim that Caleb Brown's being severely underutilized. It did feel like the ball got spread out to a number of – Weegan had at least a target or 2. Terrell had a target or 2. Vanderzee had multiple targets. Gill had multiple targets. Maybe they're not getting the ball to a guy named Luke Lachey enough. That's another thing we can talk about. But I do think they need to get the ball more to Caleb. I'm fine with that because I do think his upside athletically, as we talked about last week, is worth toying with. And here's a game coming up, Don, against his former team he's going to have some motivation to play well against Ohio State.
No doubt about it.
And have you? I'm sure you've had examples of playing, a guy playing against his former team. Have you had any good examples of a guy really showing out because of the occasion?
Well, we just very seldom had transfer players, so there really wasn't much history there. I can't recall one offhand. Not sure.
But wouldn't it be fair to surmise that, hey, maybe John Budmeyer takes Caleb aside this week and says, this is your opportunity to shine?
Well, I don't doubt for a minute that let's face it, for us to beat a team as good as Ohio State, we have to do everything just right. That means maxing out, not just on his ability, but on the abilities of all of our players that see any playing time. They have to all play a role, and in some cases, it would be a case of them putting them in position to make a big play, trying for a chunk play. In other cases, it might just be putting them in on the goal line and just to guarantee that we can convert on 4th and goal. A good example to me is Sullivan in our offense right now. And this is one thing I was glad to see. Late in the game, when I think we put him in on 1st and goal at the 8, as I recall, right? That sounds about right.
Yes. And
on that drive, we scored again, of course. We scored on 4 consecutive possessions. I couldn't help but notice after we scored, here's Cade McNamara out on the field beyond the numbers. And of course, I jokingly said, well, Cade, don't be too far out there because we might get a flag. But you could tell he was just exuberant about how well we were playing. And you can't convince me that he was upset that Sullivan was taking snaps on the goal line. Because, again, it's not all about Cade. It's all about our team. We're going to do what's best for our team. And if that makes us tougher to defend on the goal line to have Sullivan in, then at that point it makes a lot of sense. And I don't think Cade's upset at all that Sullivan's taking some snaps because it makes us a better offense. And it's not about Cade. I think Cade understands that.
And why not be happy? You led your team down the field to get to that spot, right?
That's correct. And there were some passes that came within a hair. You mentioned Wiegand, on that flag route. It was close to being a nice play, right? It went off his fingertips. I probably wouldn't call it a drop because it looked like he was extending for the ball as best he could. It still skipped off his fingers. I think a guy with great hands maybe would have made that catch. On the other hand, there aren't any perfect players out there. I like Wiegand a lot because he's more explosive than the average receiver. I can't sit and tell you he's got great hands. I don't know that. If he would have had great hands, maybe he would have made that catch. But it was a difficult opportunity. That's the point.
Let's go back to our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. We've got Brian. Brian, welcome to the show. Thank you for holding tight.
Thank you for taking my call. I really appreciate it. I've been donating for a little while, but I live in Ohio, and I really feel something connected towards the upcoming game here in a couple of weeks.
How far from Columbus?
About an hour and a half. I actually work in Columbus, and I absolutely hate it.
It's a pro sport feel, isn't it? It's different than as much as Iowa is the Dallas Cowboys of the state, like Coach Patterson used to preach to his recruits. It's a different feel out in Buckeyeville, isn't it?
It really is, and I wish that I actually had tickets to be there, but I have a selfish buddy of mine that is getting married that day, and I can't be there. So, I really want to be there, but I just, he's been my buddy for years. I just can't make it.
He's clearly not an Iowa fan then. If he was, he wouldn't have scheduled the winning.
I think he thinks that little of Iowa that he scheduled it on that day.
Well, don't worry, Brian. I know it's difficult, but I'll feel no guilt in giving you my P.O. Box number. You can just send the tickets my way, and we won't even have to tell anybody. All right.
It'll be on VetTix. I believe it's VetTix, right?
Are they good seats?
I don't know. I told him I couldn't make it. I'm a veteran, and a veteran buddy of mine asked me if I could make it. And I said, you know what, let me check my schedule. And that's when I realized, you know what, I have a selfish buddy of mine and I can't. So,
Well, I had a selfish buddy of mine last week, and that's why I did the postgame show. So I get
that was
weddings
against, and with all due respect, Corey, that was against Troy, and I don't blame you at all. And I don't blame your buddy, but I do blame mine.
Yeah. And he had 1 week. If he could have gotten married 1 week sooner, it lines up with the bye week, and all is good. That's perfect. I love bye week weddings.
Yep. Yep.
I don't mind Troy week.
Yeah, I would have loved it. I mean, at the end of the day, I would have loved it, but I wouldn't have loved it at the time because I know what the Troy game looked like at the first half. And I remember, just how I felt the first half of the game, and I wish I could have missed it for a wedding. But now, you know what? We take the hand that God gives us, right?
I will admit, it was a little bit of an odd feeling sitting as we were about to enter the reception hall, sitting and looking at my phone, being like, "Huh, Troy's leading Iowa at halftime." That's one of the oddest feelings I've had. But hey, they ran away with it, and it is what it is.
Well, and that kind of brings everything into what I kind of wanted to talk about with Tim Lester and just the kind of change that he's bringing to Iowa. And I've been a fan of Iowa since I was in high school because, like I said, I've lived in Ohio my entire life, but it just didn't seem to fit me. And I thought that the hard-nosed defense, the rushing offense kind of always fit what I loved. And I thought that that the things that Tim is bringing to Iowa is not a change of strategy, but a change of mindset. So I thought that like the Gill sweep today, while it was a run, it was the first time that I've seen it this year, and I've been watching every single game since, or from the beginning of the season. I haven't seen that Gill sweep. I haven't seen the Caden Weegan toss, which while that was hanging for a little bit longer than I would have liked, it seemed like it was something different. It was something that the defense might not have seen coming. Do you guys have anything to think about that? Or
well, let me just say this, and I'll throw it to the play caller here. To me, there were times where we're under Brian Ferentz's watch. Let me just say that, because I feel like I'm really ripping into Brian and being hard in the comparisons. But there were times over the last 3 years specifically where there would be a new play at times. But to me, more often than not, the play wouldn't fit the situation. And it's almost like we're throwing crap at the wall and seeing if it'd stick. And to me, what we're seeing, and we saw it in the second half tonight, Brian, you see a guy who understands situational offense and situational play calling. And so he's going to throw some stuff out there, but it's not random crap. Like, I go back to the Caleb Johnson misdirection run, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Perfect time for it, right? And Don, you can speak to that. Just, am I getting close as far as evaluating Tim here through 4 games?
Well, you've heard me talk about requiring that a team have to defend the entire width of the field and also the length of the field. Obviously, we need to do a better job of requiring them to defend down the field, but that's predicated, of course, on having a strong arm quarterback, having receivers that can get separation downfield and make big plays, and for that matter, protection that will give you time to put those receivers that far down the field. And so until you have all those pieces in place, it's kind of hard to be really effective over the top of any defense. Some defenses, of course, pride themselves on not being beaten over the top. We're one of those defenses. Now, that's been a problem for us, as we all know, in the past few weeks. But today, what was their longest pass completion? Anybody know offhand?
Offhand, I have no idea.
I have no idea.
I know it wasn't over 60 yards. So
Correct. That's for sure.
Let me pull it up here. So have the official box score here. I'm just looking at the official box score for the first time right now. Longest pass play appears to have been a 20-yard pass play to Addison Ostringa.
Right. How about theirs?
One explosive play. That's an explosive play,
Yeah.
Don.
Well, wait a minute. Let's talk about our running game. How many explosive plays in the running game?
I'm talking about the passing. Hold on.
Oh.
I know. I'm talking about the passing game. Don't jump down my throat here. Yes, one explosive pass play on the game, Don.
Yep. We just barely got over the bar, 20 yards. You're right, only one. But on the other hand, we only threw 19 times. So obviously, if we threw them 38 times, maybe we'd have 2. Well, 2 out of 38 is not very good. But if you can run the ball effectively, maybe 19 pass attempts is enough.
Sure. Yeah.
True.
By the way, can I just and I hate to do this, Brian, and I'll let you if you got anything else here. If you are making political comments, inappropriate comments, whatever it is in the chat, you're likely to get put in a timeout like a child. Whether you've been here for 2 years or 2 minutes, you're going to be put in a timeout, and then if it continues, you're going to be blocked. So just don't do it, please, because it's nothing personal, but we're not going to have politics or the other stuff in the chat. So just a warning, because I see that's happening. And by the way, we knew this was going to happen, Don. Whenever we have these late Saturday night games, the only thing worse was the 9-6 loss at Illinois. And you have Ryan on here making fun of Brett Bielema, and obviously the Iowa offense, the Spencer Petras, Brian Ferentz sideline stuff. And anyways, that was a rough night. A lot of drunk people that night called into the show. Brian, anything else?
I have a lot of other stuff. However, I will just bother you with, I guess, one more. So it turns out Marshall versus Ohio State today. Marshall actually had the ball for 36 minutes compared to 24. They completed their first 4 of 6 on 4th down. Marshall did. So maybe that's something that Iowa can, kind of implement to where they can figure that out and, just make make something out of nothing in case we can't figure anything out. So, but I look forward to the post-game show after Iowa and Ohio State, and hopefully it's a joyful one, and hopefully I can be celebrating like I did back in 2017, 55. I believe it was 55-24. Am I right?
I believe
That sounds right.
Yeah, I was overseas at the time, and I had a bunch of buddies in my tent at the time, and they didn't last a halftime. So, Amani Hooker, I owe you a drink whenever I see you. And once again, go Hawks, and thank you guys for all that you do.
And last thing I'll say, Brian, I'll let you slide. I do appreciate your call. It was a great call. This is This is going to be game number 3 in a series where the last 2 games both opened with an interception on the first play from scrimmage.
Yep.
You had Monty Hooker pick 6, and then remember Spencer Petras rolling left and throwing it right to an Ohio State defender.
Unfortunately, I do, and so do my buddies.
One of the most unbelievable plays I've ever seen. Brian, thank you for calling in. Stay safe, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Thank you, Corey. Thank you, Don.
Thank you.
Stuff from Brian. And we're going to get to more of your calls. We got a bunch of people. OS for Hawks, you're next in our line, but we've also got Alex. We've got, Minnesota Dave. We've got, who am I missing here? We've got Corey. So we've got a number of people, and our phone line, our Iowa Smokehouse phone line, which is 515-635-1601, is also open. Don, one thing before we take a quick 30-second break, I wanted to get to the super chat from Jason. He says, Coach, could you explain some of the intricacies of run blocking versus pass pro so we can understand why we seem to be pretty good at one but not so great at the other? How much are we just totally blowing out the pass protection thing? Are we totally blowing that out of perspective right now? How much do you buy into there's a big gap between the O-line with those things? It seemed like last year they made big strides at times with pass pro, but still couldn't run the ball. Why would that all of a sudden switch? Or is it mainly a strategic thing from game to game that we're seeing?
Well, I think a lot of people would tell you that pass protection, let me say it this way, run blocking sometimes been referred to as brute force and ignorance. That's not fair either, but it requires a strong commitment to move someone against their will. Not easy to do, especially when they're as big as you are as strong as you are, probably more athletic than you are. I'm simply stating that the average defensive lineman, in general, I think, is a little more athletic than the average offensive lineman. There's that old adage, well, if he can't move quite well enough, we'll move him to O-line and make him a player there. And there are examples of that working. But the bottom line, you teach aggression, you teach coming off the ball, creating a seam in the defense, driving someone else against their will in the direction you want them to go. On the other hand, pass protection, you got to remind them, do not get overextended. Don't lunge to block the man that you're responsible for blocking, because if you lunge to block him, your shoulder pads are exposed. If he gets to your shoulder pads, then he's got a chance to get on top of you and beat you to the quarterback. So it's a different trait. You're taught to sit back, and basically you're taught to mirror the movement of that guy you're trying to block and just keep him off the quarterback. If you're getting too aggressive, then you're more likely to lose him because you're overextended. If you play too much on your toes, of course, he might just grab you and pull you out of the way because your weight is so far forward. So the really good offensive linemen understand that they sit back. One way to guarantee to become a good pass protector is to keep your shoulders from being exposed to the guy that's rushing through you. If he gets to your shoulders, he's probably going to beat you. On the other hand, if you're able to punch off on him with your hands and keep him at arm's length, let's face it, in so many cases, your arms are longer than the defender's arms. Not always. Sometimes they're just as long, but still good technique involves you keeping your body in between him and the quarterback. And I got to do my job. If I have to do it for 4 seconds, that's my goal. Sometimes I'm not able to buy that much time. Sometimes the quarterback has to slide in the pocket to get away from my man. I hate to think I caused him to have to do that, but you're doing the best you can, of course. And sometimes the guy you're going against is an all-Big Ten player. It's not easy, especially on 3rd and long. One of the things that helped us, as you saw, Corey, today, we threw the ball more on 1st down in the second half, and that made a difference.
Not a ton more.
Not a ton, but enough to keep them off balance some.
Yeah. And like I said, they started the 3rd quarter in that first drive of the 3rd quarter with a nifty pass play on play action. And I just thought that
making it into the boundary, and the tight end came across the formation.
Yep.
We hit him on that short, high percentage throw, and we gained how much? 20, right? That was the longest play we had.
Was that that was the 20-yard gain? First play?
Yep.
Yeah, you're right.
Yep.
And they were in field range very quickly. And I felt like that just made a difference, being in scoring territory with a couple of big plays to start the second half. That just changed things.
Yeah, kick return to the -33, the first play. Naked into the boundary. We're on the right hash. We fake left, rolled right. And the tight end that was the wing back on our left side came under the formation and gained 20 yards. And all of a sudden, in one play, we're across midfield. Next play, incidentally, outside zone for +17 and a late hit. They gave us another 15 yards. Now we're on the 15-yard line. 2 plays.
Folks, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more of your calls, more of Coach Don Patterson, more of your comments, and some of my notes from Iowa's 31-14 win over the Minnesota Golden Gophers. We'll be back with more Iowa postgame with Coach Don Patterson.
Hey, what's going on? I'm Ryan Glick, co-founder and CEO of Groove. And if you're a real estate professional, I have something I think you're going to be interested in. We've developed a platform that's transforming the way deals are prospected and managed in the real estate world. With Groove, you can organize real estate data in one place and share real estate deals with just one click. Join other real estate pros and reclaim up to 90% of your time. Head over to letsgroove.com/signup and start your free trial today.
Casmium believes every young athlete deserves a shot at greatness. By making data analytics accessible and easy, they provide a new way for coaches and athletes to improve their game. Casmium's digital scoring app, all-in-one stats, and chart software enable teams to quickly and easily find new ways to strategize and harness the power of data. Join Casmium in revolutionizing the world of youth sports with tools that make a difference. Schedule a software demo or sign up today at Casmium.com. Casmium, where sports technology sparks victory. I want to take a moment to thank Ascent Nutrition. They have been part of this show for a long, long time. And you see our landing page from the Hawkeye of the Storm, proudly sponsored with our post-game coverage with Coach John Patterson by Ascent Nutrition. It's a company owned by a Hawkeye graduate, a big Hawkeye fan, and Lance Shuttler. This company, over the past couple of years, they've really exceeded the expectations as it relates to bettering Hawkeye fans' health. And their focus is really on bettering lives, lifestyles, whether we're talking about stress levels, gut health, brain clarity. All these things are things we all battle and we need on a day-to-day basis. Their detox products are awesome. Their pine needle extract tastes great. And as I've continued to get to know this great brand, continue to appreciate the necessity that is having a good nutrition plan in place in order to battle the stresses of daily life. As you continue to get to know Ascent Nutrition by going to goascentnutrition.com, read all about these two products and perhaps benefit from their detox bundle. You'll get 15% off by using the link in the description below. It's goascentnutrition.com/Hawkeyes and use the code Hawkeyes15. Again, that's the code Hawkeyes15. This is the page. You can find the link in the description below. Click on that link and order your bundle and get 15% off the bundle of pine needle extract and the humic and fulvic acid, all to better your health and support your energy level, all from Ascent Nutrition. Thank you to Ascent Nutrition for being a part of our postgame coverage once again. All right, folks, we are back here with Coach Don Patterson as we continue into, what are we? Entering about the hour and a half mark following Iowa's 31-14 victory over the Minnesota Golden Gophers. If you have a question for Coach Patterson or myself, you can give us a call, 515-635-1601, or you can log on via StreamYard. We'll go to our next caller. We've got OS for Hawks on our Iowa Smokehouse line. Welcome to the show, sir.
Good evening, Corey and Don. Can you hear me?
We got you loud and clear. Thank you for being so
Good.
patient. The hold line.
Yeah, seriously, at my age, waiting that long can be a struggle sometimes.
I'm surprised you're not asleep.
Well, I'm surprised too, to be quite honest. I wanted to bring up one thing that I saw on the broadcast. On the broadcast, they said that both of the starting safeties for Minnesota were backups because one of the starting safeties was starting at cornerback and moved to cornerback, and the other safety was hurt. And I want to bring that up because if that's true, we've been talking about the passing game. I wanted to ask Don, if that's true, why would you not attack those players? That's my first question.
You're saying this, you're talking about the safeties?
Yeah, Minnesota supposedly had two safeties starting that for this game that had not started there before.
Well, I believe when we threw the inside fade to Vanderzee, that's what we were doing, is attacking the inside safety. That was the safety defending that play, I'm sure.
Yeah, I guess what I'm asking is why we wouldn't attack them more if they were, first time safeties in the game. Why we didn't attack them more. And that's fine. I
wish we would have. I don't know, excuse me, what our biggest concern might be. Maybe it was concerned that we couldn't protect long enough. They were bringing 5 rushers a lot. And in that regard, maybe we were especially concerned that we wouldn't have time to hold the ball that long to get a receiver that far down the field to attack someone in deep coverage.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up. There was a lot. There was some talk earlier in the chat about the offensive line not playing up, and I'm an old offensive lineman, and I'm the first, if I've ever called in the show to talk about the offensive line and maybe some of the lackluster play at times. Tonight was not one of those nights. Even though we talked about the pass defense, on the offensive line, I agree with you 100%, Don, about the fact that there was many times that there was 5 and even 6 players, on that rush that they had to defend against. So the offensive line was not an issue to me tonight. The other thing that I really wanted to bring forward is Dakin, I thought, had a great game as a punter. And I have to agree with Corey. Corey has been preaching that, and I'm going to sit here and say, Corey, you were absolutely right.
Let's remember, everybody was crying about him after the last game against Troy because he gave up the play at the end of that. He had a great second half against Troy, and we talked about that on this show. I'm like, hey.
Well, I think he averaged close to 50 yards a kick tonight.
He was excellent. And I'll pull up the numbers here.
Yeah.
For the night, Reese Dakin, 5 punts, 248 yards, 50 yards per punt, 3 inside the 20.
Yep.
And this was through the first 2.5 quarters. It was a field position game.
Yep. And this is a freshman kicker, folks.
I made this comment late in the third quarter. We have consistently picked up yardage in trading punts. Their punter was, I don't know what his average was, maybe 40 yards. Ours is 50. On average, we probably picked up 10 yards every time we traded punts.
Yeah,
actually more because our punt return yardage was more than theirs too.
And one of the last little things that I wanted to bring up, and I don't think it's a major issue, the broadcast also talked about Caleb's last run when he ran out of bounds on that long run to the out of bounds. They said something about he winced, and my buddy and I we text back and forth through the game, and he's in the chat once in a while, Eric Weidman. But anyway, we were texting about whether there was a hammy issue there. I don't think so. After seeing Caleb after the game, it did not look like there was an issue there. But the broadcast did say something about that. It looked like that he had pulled up and winced a little bit there. But
there was one shot of Caleb on the sideline riding the bike.
Yeah, but that was earlier in the game, though.
It was
that was before that run.
That was.
And then I had one last thing, and I will get off. I realize there's plenty of people calling. My only other thing is people were talking in the chat earlier about Caleb Johnson's suspension, and I wanted to remind people that his suspension in that first game was from a player conduct committee actually suspended Caleb. That was not a coach's decision. That was actually a player committee that suggested that first half, and then it was upheld. I don't know if people.
You're getting this information from where?
Well, that's the information that I was given, that it was a player committee that suggested the suspension for conduct.
Okay. Well,
I may be wrong. Trust me, I have been wrong before.
what he did during the offseason, I think it was pretty clear cut that he knew what he was doing in the offseason, and he kind of, I think, it sounded to me like he was just kind of accepting the half game suspension. And that was one of the reasons why I'm like preseason, like, I don't know, is this guy really serious?
Well, I thought I heard that in the broadcast of the first game. Maybe I'm wrong.
Oh, okay.
That they had brought up that it was a player committee that had suggested that.
But I mean, what I'm saying is, it was still a team violation. Whoever it was, it was a violation of team rules.
And I lied when I said I had one last thing. I actually had one last thing. I wanted to say that there was adjustments on both sides of the ball at halftime. Defensively, we adjusted, and obviously we put more pressure on the quarterback because we brought players. We brought linebackers and blitzed a little bit in certain situations, and we obviously put more pressure on the quarterback. And obviously that showed because he was nowhere near as accurate as he was in that second quarter. And, and we also made adjustments on the offensive side of the ball. So, again, guys, I appreciate talking to you. And sometime maybe when I call in, we'll just talk about golf.
Sounds good, sir. Appreciate the call.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right.
I made this comment, Corey, as the second half played out a little bit. It was really fundamentally this difference. They flinched and we didn't. They flinched and we didn't. We weren't happy with the way the first half ended, but we took the bull by the horns to start the second half, and we simply kept the pressure on them the rest of the game, to the point where they really didn't respond. They were whipped.
How concerned were you at halftime?
Well, I had some concern. I guess my biggest concern, are we going to, well, let's talk about the conversation we had.
Sure.
Maybe you already have before I got on.
No, you can share however much you want to share.
Well, to those that aren't aware, my phone rings at halftime, and lo and behold, it's Corey calling. And I was a little bit behind real time because I was backing plays up and taking notes and whatnot. And I said, Corey, I'm not done with the first half yet. There's still a couple of plays left. And you said, well, I don't know that you're going to like them because I think one of them was a touchdown, wasn't it? As I recall?
Yes.
Yeah.
Minnesota touchdown with 21 seconds. Here's another thing I didn't like about that, Don. I tweeted this out during that play that Iowa I felt was really outcoached on that drive on a number of levels. First of all, were some really good play calls, excellent execution, a couple of missed tackles. But how about running that clock all the way down to 21 seconds? Iowa had 2 timeouts on the clock. It wasn't as bad as what we saw last night from, was it Syracuse? I don't know if you caught that, Syracuse and
I didn't.
Stanford. But, I just hate seeing that, when they had 2, 3, 4 minutes and they're running on the field and they're able to get the clock all the way down to 21 seconds and score. And then you look up and Iowa's got 2 timeouts. You'd like to use those at some point to conserve the clock, but you've heard me complain about clock management. Anyways, yes, I called you with about 21 seconds left in the half.
Right. Yeah, so a couple of things I've got here as the half ran down. They did a good job keeping us off balance. 3rd and 6 on the plus 30. Taylor runs for 17 yards. We expected pass, and they ran the ball for a big gainer. TD pass by Minnesota. I guarantee this is one thing that will come up. Poor job on shedding blockers, and we got to wrap up. Missed number 4 missed. Harris missed on that play. Other missed tackles, I had Harris down. I've got Harris down for 3 misses. Shoney down for a miss. Castro down for a miss.
Look, real quick, let me just say this. It felt like early in this game, and you can talk about why this was, but it felt like Minnesota was taking advantage of a guy named Kyler Fisher a little bit. And then a couple of open field opportunities for Jamari Harris to make big plays in the backfield. He's where he needs to be, but like you said, missing a couple of tackles. He also made a really nice play in pass coverage in the end zone. And this is a difficult assignment. Daniel Jackson's a really good receiver, and Jamari didn't have him all night. It seemed to me like Iowa was pretty okay with basically playing him. I thought Jay Higgins, when he got an opportunity against Taylor in pass coverage, was really good. And that was good NFL tape for Jay Higgins.
Yes, it was. No doubt about it. The bottom line, though, here's another thing they did. It was obvious to me. I made a note here somewhere. They're picking their spots, but they're going after Lee, just like they would have gone after TJ if he was in there. It makes sense that you would. And they had modest success. There were times when Deshaun was too far off. Easy pitch and catch in front of him, but at least the ball's not on top of it. And so, we gave up some yardage here and there and gave him another first down here and there. But at least Deshaun didn't allow the ball to get behind him. That was important. But I guarantee it's going to be emphasized tackling because we missed a few tackles.
Yeah, I agree. Zach, thank you for the super chat. Do appreciate that, sir. And Jack, thank you for the super chat. And Caleb, we trust beat Ohio State. How about in Caleb Brown we trust? Wouldn't that be nice? Again, they get a big performance out of the other Caleb in a homecoming of sorts for Caleb Brown. His first game back in Buckeye Stadium since he transferred.
Yeah, that would be nice. I couldn't help but find myself thinking, based on last year's game, how appropriate would it have been if Widgeon could have busted a punt return? I was hoping for that because we all know every time he fills the ball with a little bit of running room, you get your hopes up a little bit that it might go the distance because he's more elusive than the average guy, no doubt about it.
One thing I had written down here regarding Widgeon, which by the way, I'm going to start calling him Wet Jet. When he gets his first touchdown, he's now Caden Wet Jet Widgeon. But he had a return early in that second quarter that was wiped out by a TJ Hall holding penalty.
Right.
And it seems like they've had several of those this season. And I don't even know that they've directly affected the play. I guess that the numbers would say more often than not when you have penalties like that, illegal block in the back, holding on returns, they more often than not don't really affect the play so much. I didn't really feel like that one affected the play, and you can just kind of see the angst on Caden's face when the camera zoomed in on him because he's worked his tail off to have opportunities, and unfortunately they've had some penalties in some spots. That's something that needs to be worked out during the bye week with LeVar Woods' crew.
That reminds me too, Corey, the fade route versus Deshaun, they went for 28. Further review, the play stood, but I swear it seemed to me the ball was getting jostled a little bit. I thought they might reverse it.
But yet NBC came back. First of all, why are we going to commercial with a huge call like that? Stupid.
I don't know.
You're going to commercial with a huge call like that, so we don't really get it. And then they come back, and the rules expert, who I was critical of earlier, says, pretty obvious that he caught that. Yeah, I'm with you, Don. I don't think it was pretty obvious. And furthermore, I know we can have this debate about what is a catch, but how secure did he really have the ball? Because then a step or two out of bounds, the ball pops out without much contact. So I don't know. That back foot was on the ground for a while. He may have had it, but it was close.
Yeah. When you called me at halftime, Corey, I made the comment, and I wrote it down here too. We have not handled man coverage well. First off, extra rusher. I say man, mostly man free, but maybe some man mixed in. I'm not sure. But the bottom line, of course, the extra rusher gives them a better chance. Makes sense if you get X number of sacks rushing 4. If you bring a fifth player, might that boost your sack production a little bit, or at least generate more pressure for the quarterback. But anyway, we didn't handle man coverage well. The pressure is bothering us. We need man beaters. That's what I told you at halftime. And man beaters don't necessarily have to be home run plays, but they've got to be plays that are clearly designed to take advantage of man defense. And a prime example was the inside fade to Vanderzee. That was a good example. That was a good play. How about another good example? How about the first play of the second half? We're on the right hash. We fake left. We roll right into the boundary on naked. We hit the tight end coming across the formation. The guy may end up on the wing back over there that went under the formation. He had no chance to cover that. That's one reason it ended up being a 20-yard gain. So those are just a couple of examples. But here's the bottom line. If you really want to be good at it, you heard me tell the story about playing Miami. And we gave Miami some problems in the Orange Bowl. And they were a great defense. Not good, but great. And then a couple of years later, they came up here. First night game ever in Kenning. And all the man coverage went away. And after the game, they beat us in a low-scoring game. I asked a great defensive coordinator, what happened to all your man coverage? His response was, I may be dumb, but I'm not stupid. It caused us all kinds of problems 2 years ago. And he said, you got too many man beaters. That's a comment he made. And I've never forgotten that because as I've heard some of our players talk about it, if you want to play man against us, in the old days maybe, let's imagine it's some kind of pressure man situation. the mindset 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago is, well, let's see how we can avoid a bad play. We got way more aggressive with our thinking going forward, especially in the late 80s, early 90s. If you're going to play man against us, as we used to talk about it, if you're going to attack our juggler, we're going to attack your juggler back. And we're going to be better at it than you are. Our knife's going to be better than your knife. We're going to make you pay. And we did that. And guess what? All that man coverage went away. So my point is, in saying all that, somebody that is committed to man coverage, you better have a lot of man beaters. Ways to take advantage of that man coverage.
Micro Mage says, am I wrong? I'd love to see a home and home with Texas. It'd be such a weird but fun series.
Well, based on their talent level, I don't know that Kirk's very excited about scheduling that. That would be a good example would be, who wants to go home and home with Alabama? I jokingly made the comment before Wisconsin came out with their schedule. I wonder if Alvey set that game up because he wanted to be sure the next coach didn't become more popular than Barry Alvarez was as their head coach. That was just a joke to say it that way, but truthfully, why would you want to play Alabama home and home? And a lot of people say the same thing about Texas.
Yeah.
It might be a case where they beat you on their field and your field. It might happen that way.
You would think if there's ever a time to play Alabama, it would have been this year, and yet look at what happened in Wisconsin. Right. Let's get back to our Iowa Smokehouse line. We've got Alex on hold. Alex, welcome to the show.
Good evening, gentlemen. How are you?
We're doing great, except we didn't see enough Caleb Brown. Let's get that out of the way first. I know you want to talk about it. I know you're excited.
So he did have the one target, and Dom was right. He did have the one target, but it was overthrown. Cade had let him way too much. And the issue or the problem that was there is that Caleb had actually beaten the guy. He had gotten separation from his defender, and if Cade actually hit him in the numbers, I don't know if it would have been a touchdown. I don't know if there was any coverage on the back end, but that could have been a pretty big game for Iowa in that first half. It could have, really switched around that first half. But kind of obviously a tale of two halves. I thought Iowa played okay in the first quarter, so it seems like they got 3-ish quarters kind of put together. They still haven't got the full game yet. But I think in the second half, we saw a more confident Cade, and it's due to this types of plays and situations that they set up for him. A naked boot where they just a little pitch pass to one of the Patterson the Stringer, one of the tight ends. For one, we're getting the tight ends involved, one of our better position groups on the field. And it also builds his confidence, which I think is definitely going to be a key going into Ohio State. We need to build Cade's confidence. Obviously, we can talk about, people have been talking about the pass pro and the run blocking. And, there have, I think, teams that are throwing an extra guy at Iowa's offensive line to see if we can actually pick it up or not. So I don't have a whole lot of notes. I'm actually, if you can't tell, different background. I'm at home right now. I'm in Altoona right now near Adventureland. So,
did you break into someone's house? Is that why you're whispering?
No. Well, my son and my wife are in the hotel room. I'm in a hotel room with my they're asleep, so I'm trying to keep the voice down a little bit.
We appreciate the fact that you're so committed to waiting on hold for an hour and chatting about this game. So,
I appreciate the wife understanding my fanaticism, I guess is what you would call it.
Well, so. I appreciate her as well. Cade, 11 of 19 for 62 yards, Don. What do you make of those numbers?
Well, I don't know how many of those incompletions were drops, but I know there were
a few. Three. I remember Washington had one right in his hands.
Right.
There was another one by
Vanderzee had
a ball that skipped off Weegen's hand.
Vanderzee had a bad one in that first half. Drop on 3rd and 4. By the way, good Cade throw. Got to make the catch. Early first quarter on a big 3rd down. There's another one. Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'd be critical of Cade, I thought under pressure he wasn't great. I think back to the play. Let's see, was it 3rd quarter? Let me find this. No, 2nd quarter, where Cade takes the sack. He tries to evade the pressure. edge pressure Don, I believe, and
Right.
an opportunity to go, 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and evade the pressure, shoelace tackle, and he goes down with a somersault. You know what play
Right.
I'm talking about.
Yep.
The kind of play where you look at it and you're like, man, if you had a guy who was a little more mobile in there who can roll out and escape.
Those are examples where you realize football really is a game of inches.
Sure, absolutely. Anything else, Alex?
Nope. I mean, I think obviously we saw the second half adjustments, which was, great. We saw the offensive line. Caleb Johnson, I think he always credits his offensive line, which, is great. But obviously he has to make, he's got a bunch of missed tackles too, just sometimes it's really hard to bring him down. Jazzy Patterson looked pretty good and spelling him out too. I know near the end they rested Caleb because I think one of the callers, I can't remember who, had commented that he kind of winced and he was they showed him on the bench and the training staff was around him, but I think then he was on the sidelines yucking it up with some of the other players, so it seemed like he's in good spirits, and I don't think it's anything too serious. Plus we have a bye week to get everything, everybody healthy, which Iowa thankfully has done through the past, 4 weeks. Is Iowa's relatively healthy. We haven't had too many serious injuries or, maybe nicks and bruises here. Obviously get those healed up before we play a very tough Ohio State team.
But can I say something else, Alex, that I thought was unfair that you said last week?
What was that?
You said something about Seth Anderson having stone hands, and I'm trying to figure out where that statement came from, because I don't recall Seth Anderson having any more drops than any other receiver on that roster last year.
Yeah, I'm not going to commit to saying I said that, but I remember in 2022 he had quite a few drops.
Well, he wasn't here in 2022. He just got here last year.
Or 2023. Last year, sorry. 2023. He had some.
Yeah, he did, but so did Caleb, and so did Raghani and all those guys.
Just because one person has it, you have to. But I also attributed him to Keegan Johnson, who mysteriously in 2023 had a soft tissue injury, and he played one game against Nevada in 2022, and all of a sudden now he's playing for Kansas and doing fairly well. Good for him. I just think Seth Anderson's going the same route. He's saving this, I'm hurt, I'm not playing, I'm hurt, and then all of a sudden,
he is hurt. I don't know. Keegan Johnson wasn't faking either, Alex.
Soft tissue. I'm not saying. I'm not going to come on here and say that.
I can promise you on 100% authority that Keegan Johnson was really. I don't even know how to put this. Let's just say he made every effort to come back, and he was dealt a very unfair card. I'll just say that. And he absolutely was dealing with health problems. They weren't all related to just a hamstring problem. He was dealing with multiple health problems that finally. And I don't know what
he's not dealing with at Kansas State. So it just smelled fishy to me. That's all I'm saying. I'm going to say I'm not a conspiracy theorist here, but it just smelled fishy.
Hold on a second, though. There are other factors at play. Just because he's not dealing with the same stuff at Kansas State that he dealt with at Iowa, it's not just about the player. He's also surrounded by different people down there. Just keep that in mind. He's surrounded by different people, different weight people, different staff, all that.
Yeah, it's just obviously with Seth Anderson this year, I saw it with Keegan Johnson in 2022. So if he stays, great. If he decides,
why would Seth Anderson fake an injury? What reason would Seth Anderson have to fake?
They never said he was faking. He may have a soft tissue injury, but it's one of those things of where he could just be kind of milking it. I mean, I don't want to get actually hurt playing for this. Obviously Iowa's offense is a lot better this year than it was in 2022 or even 2023.
You know of players that don't want to play? They would rather milk an injury and not play.
I'm not saying he doesn't want to play. He doesn't want to play for Iowa. He could just say, "All right, I'm going to just save my season and go somewhere else."
He could have left in the transfer portal if he was feeling that way. Why didn't he leave in the transfer portal in the offseason?
He thought he had a shot at being number one wide receiver, or somewhere higher in the depth chart, and he just wasn't there.
I think you're right.
If he hits the transfer portal, I'll come on here and
he may hit the transfer portal, but that doesn't mean he was milking an injury.
Yep.
Just because he hits the transfer portal. Oh my goodness. We've had players. Listen, Iowa's had How many players hit the? They have a dozen players every year hit the. Maybe not quite that many.
They don't. I was pretty good at retaining players. I will say that they're really good at retaining players
every year. And some of those guys are guys that have really struggled with injury and have struggled. But when you struggle with injury, you know what happens, Alex? You oftentimes slip down the depth chart because other guys get more work in. So if Seth Anderson ends up behind Weegan and Gill and Howard and all these, it's not because it's because he was out, and it is related to the injury, but that doesn't mean he was milking an injury. I also know Seth Anderson personally, really nice, good kid. And I cannot imagine any scenario in which he's milking an injury. I also know who his dad was. Who he holds the single game record for NFL receiving yards when he played for the Rams back in the day. I believe it was, right, Don?
Flipper Anderson. Yeah.
Flipper Anderson. And Seth's brother was a really good receiver at Utah. I don't think that's in the DNA of that family, personally, but you have a right to speculate. Hey, conspiracy theories. There's plenty of YouTube channels out there, Alex. If you want to just talk conspiracy theories, I'm sure there's plenty of YouTube channels out there that would like to.
Hashtag flat earth, hashtag dinosaurs never existed. So before I leave, maybe you guys can, you and Don can converse on this. Like, so I talked a little bit about Cade's confidence, and it seemed like he got a little bit more when he was able to hit some of those, even they were just little dink and dunk passes, but it seemed like he got more confidence and was able to put a better spin on the ball. As an offensive coordinator, if you have a quarterback that is lacking confidence, how do you get their confidence back up, and what's a good way to, if a quarterback is rattled, what is the best way for them to kind of get their head back in the game? And how, I know everyone's been calling for Sullivan, which I may have been there at some points myself, but at one point, was there a time to where it's like, okay, we need to put it in somebody else, or it's like, no, we need to stick with this guy because you know what he gives, because I think he can still win us this game. But that's something I'll kind of hear from you, but I'll jump off so someone else can get on. But thanks, guys.
Thank you, Alex. Appreciate it, sir.
Then that comes to mind for me, Corey, is simply call plays that complement his abilities. Perfectly high percentage throws, and give him a chance to hit a few completions one after another. The bottom line, why we only had 19 pass attempts, last time I checked, we were running the ball very effectively through most of the game, and especially in the second half, it was kind of obvious if we could continue to control the line of scrimmage, we're going to shorten this game a lot. We built up a 17-point lead, and we're going to run 4-minute offense maybe for the entire fourth quarter, close to it. You saw us not even breaking the huddle until there were 10 seconds left on the clock and snapping the ball with 1 or 2 seconds left. We did a good job with 4-minute offense in that regard. We shortened the game quite a bit. And PJ didn't seem to mind because PJ was more than happy to get out of there as soon as possible anyway. Incidentally, that handshake was a drive-by if there ever was. Did you notice that?
Between PJ and Kirk?
Yeah.
I didn't see anything. I didn't see it.
It didn't last very long.
I'll have to go back and watch that again. Thank you for the super chat, Jason. Any reason to read into the fact that Kirk hasn't had a contract extension? My goodness, how often do you got to re-sign guys? Man, he signed to the end of 2029. It's 2024. I mean, he says usually we see contracts kicked out 4+ years for recruiting purposes. He signed through 2024 or 2029. That's 5 years from now. What? I mean,
yeah, we have bigger things to worry about than a contract extension for Kirk.
Yeah, maybe we're not on the same page, but yeah, he signed until the beginning of 2030, end of 29. Scott, thank you for the super chat as well. Seeing the offense get it going the second half was awesome to see. Then seeing the offensive line push the Gophers down the field, it was great seeing Johnson have another good game. Go Hawks. Thank you, Scott. Very much appreciate the super chat. And Zach, thank you for your super chat as well. Hey, Corey and Coach, do you guys think it's possible to beat Ohio State? I think if we put a whole game together, we have a shot. But what do you guys think? Sure, Don, it's possible.
Absolutely, it's possible.
Preview.
It's not going to come easy. It's not going to come easy. We're going to have to play the best game of the years that we've played so far. But today was a step in the right direction. If you would have told any Iowa fan, oh, by the way, we're going to beat Minnesota by 17, they would have taken that. I'm pretty sure a lot of Iowa fans, if you said, I was a 17-point favorite, where do you want to put your money? A lot of those Iowa fans would have said, my money's on the Gophers, because I don't think Iowa will cover that. Well, we did.
Don, thank you, Amanda. Can you put a plug in for everybody, Don? We got about 450 people on here. Can you please reiterate what Amanda's saying here with her comment on the screen?
Well, I know even the thumbs up, I don't understand, what did you call them?
The like button?
No, just the way they analyze all this kind of stuff. What's that called?
Oh, the algorithm. The algorithm.
The algorithm, yeah. I don't understand how all that works, but I do know. I'll make a plug for two things. Hit the like button. We appreciate that. And beyond that, Corey, tell me where we are right now. Maybe 9,400?
It's a good question. So subscribers on the YouTube channel, again, we got about 450 people still watching here as we hit midnight. And on the channel right now at this hour, we're at 9,355 subscribers. So how long is it going to take to hit 10,000? I would have to think we can get there this season.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Corey. A lot of our really, really faithful listeners have never bothered to subscribe, even though they're listening to the show week in and week out, and we greatly appreciate it. But do us a favor and subscribe. It doesn't cost anything to subscribe, and it's rare, as I understand it, Corey. It's rare for any kind of podcast to go over 10,000. That's a pretty good.
That will be a milestone for this show, and just so people are aware. And I'll talk more about this here in the coming weeks. We will be doing some Iowa apparel giveaways on this show. So a couple things to do. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you like all the videos. But this is very important. If you're not following the show on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all right? Specifically Instagram and Facebook we're gonna be doing some special giveaways on those two platforms via the platforms, Facebook and Instagram. So if you're not following us at From the Hawkeye on Instagram, Twitter, X, I'm sorry, I always forget to use the new terminology, X. Follow us on X and Instagram, and then From the Hawkeye of the Storm on Facebook. And if you're following, you're going to have an opportunity to win authentic Hawkeye merchandise and apparel. So check it all out on your favorite social media platforms. Let's go back to our Iowa Smokehouse line. Before we do that, I want to take a moment to thank Iowa Smokehouse because you've been hearing me plug them throughout this show. They are sponsoring our call-in line, but they're a big part of our coverage throughout the season once again. And, man, their stuff is good. Just polished off some of their jalapeno meat sticks the other day, but they've got so many options. You see the country-style bacon meat sticks here in your picture. It's all great for game day or any day. Their steak bites are delicious. Their barbecue sauce is to die for. Use the code Hawkeyes. Hawkeyes for 15% off over at iowasmokehouse.com. Again, that's the code Hawkeyes at iowasmokehouse.com for 15% off. Boy, you can tell it's hitting midnight here soon. And also, you'll see how tasting is believing. That is a fact. Tasting is believing with Iowa Smokehouse. Brad Van Meter down at State Farm, also a big part of our coverage. Give Brad a call on Monday morning for a free quote. Wouldn't it be great if we could flood Brad's voicemail on Monday morning after the big weekend of Hawkeye athletics? 515-256-6480 is his number. Again, that's 515-256-6480, or visit him online at bradvanmeter.com. He's located down at 4229 Fleur Drive, south side of Des Moines. Let's go back to our Iowa Smokehouse line. We've got Minnesota Dave, who's hopefully a lot calmer than he was an hour ago. Minnesota Dave, welcome.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. When can I meet you again?
I love it. Thank you. We needed that as 3 minutes to midnight.
Oh, God.
And you needed
that. I felt that in the first half we played well, and then you guys made an adjustment offensively. your offensive line basically made holes you can like drive an aircraft carrier through. That was just basically the game. I'm ready. I'm done. I'm off the boat. Screw the boat. I'm off. I'm ready for a head coach from Toledo to maybe come in to coach the Gophers. I like him a lot. Because if the PJ's just not going to be doing it, and this is upsetting.
So you jumped headfirst off the boat.
I've been slowly off the boat. Last year I was halfway off the boat. Now I'm almost fully off the boat. You can't have an adjustment like that and just.
Well, here's a question, Don, because the college football coaching landscape seems to be so tedious nowadays. And Minnesota struggled last year. Their defense has not been it's better now. I mean, I think it's going to show itself to be better throughout the rest of the season. Again, it's still early. But if Minnesota ends up having a below 500 season, is PJ on the hot seat? Because he's been on the big board for a number of big jobs. We hear his name tossed around. He and James Franklin like to put themselves out there. I think it's those guys putting themselves out there more often than not. But is he on the hot seat, Don? If he has a bad season,
I'm not sure. I do have a friend that lives in the Twin Cities and knows a lot about Minnesota football, and he made a comment that the things that people might not be aware of. I think the team grade points maybe higher than it's ever been. I think PJ's doing a lot of the right things. Culturally, I think it's probably similar to an environment that we have. I'm not saying it's as good as ours. I think ours is more established, obviously, but I think PJ certainly is trying to model his program after Iowa's, and that's a comment to Kirk and to Iowa that he might want to do that. But I think he feels that that's a good way to achieve success is to go the Iowa route. You could argue that Brett Bielema was able to do that in much the same way at Wisconsin, and now at Illinois. Illinois, incidentally, what a good win for them over at Lincoln. I was impressed with Illinois.
Yeah, they were very impressive. They were very impressive.
They really were. That's what, about 90,000 people, as I recall, 80-something thousand. They're loud, and Illinois never lost their poise. They were the more poised team.
Bielema is probably one of the best coaches for with a program that is kind of like, I wouldn't say struggles, but mediocre program. Hello?
Don?
Yes. Hear me? I'm sorry, yes. I was bumping my volume up.
Go ahead, Minnesota Dave. Anything else?
Yeah,
it's those awkward moments, those awkward silent moments that make this show.
Yeah, it is very awkward and very silent. I'm upset. I felt that I felt we played a great first half, except for, the one thing I've noticed is just basically our quarterback, he's throwing behind his receivers a couple of times. The interception happened because he threw behind his receiver. And right. It's kind of like this happened a couple times. He threw behind the receiver on the last interception that Iowa, I think, had, and it ticked off the defensive player and went right in the safety's hands. But it's very frustrating as a Gopher fan. The big thing is always for Minnesota is, at least win 7-8 games and make it to a bowl game, and at least beat Iowa and Wisconsin. That's always a big thing. That always helps the recruiting around the area if you can beat both of those schools. And we haven't beaten both of those schools since Coach Gutekunst was the coach. And we beat Wisconsin and Iowa in 1990. But, man, I'm just I'm glad that certain things are legalized in Minnesota. And I'm just going to say this: after I smoke that certain thing to calm down, I'm going to order some Iowa Smokehouse, probably some of your sausage blocks. Those look really, really good. And, a little.
To that, Dave, because there is no such thing as Minnesota Smokehouse. I mean, I guess there could be, but you do order yourself some Iowa Smokehouse.
Iowa, all that stuff looks really good. 15% off. Yeah, I'll do it.
Absolutely. And Minnesota Dave, I do appreciate you waiting on hold for so long. I know it took a while, so thank you for being patient.
Oh, I'm glad you did, because if you got me right away, I would have been F this, F that, and it would have been not great.
We don't need that. So thank you, Dave, and I'm sure we'll chat it up again here at some point over on Mark's show.
All right. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Dave. All right, couple things here. Kevin Downey, Kevin's a good friend of mine, and he wanted me to ask this question, but I see he threw it up in the chat. He says, Coach, is lack of ball going downfield a scheme issue, a play issue, or a McNamara issue? And let's see. Let me see if he added to that. Please ask Coach Patterson why McNamara does not ever throw the ball down the field. What do you have to say to Kevin? Don, that's a fair question.
Well, a lot of our schemes are designed for the ball to be thrown short or intermediate routes. Logically, you would think that those should have a higher completion percentage than a longer throw. There's a lot of truth to that. Sometimes maybe we aren't calling plays that'll send the receiver way down the field because we're simply not sure we have enough, can buy the quarterback enough time to get the ball downfield. And then let's not kid ourselves. Part of our problem is we have a hard time finding a matchup that we can have great confidence in, because it's always a function of those guys that are covering us. That's going to be a challenge for Ohio State. I don't know anything about Ohio State's secondary, but it's safe to say they have access to really good athletes. Not hard to imagine that some of those matchups are going to be difficult to beat if they choose to man up and pressure us. We have to have a plan for that. I don't even know how much they've pressured this year. But it seems like their defense is doing a better job than what they've done in the past. In the past, it seemed like they weren't too concerned about it, and they simply thought they were going to outscore you anyway, and they often did.
Zach asks, where is Tom tonight? Late night up in Minneapolis. I did not include Tom on tonight's show, not because Tom wouldn't do great, but Tom is very busy this weekend. We will involve Tom heading into the bye week and moving forward during the final 2/3 of the season. So I do appreciate that, Zach, because I saw somebody, I think, commented on it either was it yesterday or earlier today about how much they liked having Tom as a part of the show and being able to get the perspective from Kirk following Kirk's availability post-game. Super chat from Leeds. Coach, is there any reason Kirk would not trust Sullivan between the 20s but trust him in the red zone? Seems backwards.
Well, let's face it. Let's just go back to the Iowa State game. One thing that showed up there, we are, well, and I mentioned our numbers even from the last couple of years. We were not very good in the red zone. We were 11th in the Big Ten last year out of 14 teams. So it's not a problem that's new just because of Tim Lester. I mean, we had a problem a year ago and 2 years ago with red zone scoring success on offense. So logically, we talked about it. It's difficult to move the ball down there. If you try to throw the ball and they're only rushing 3, you got 8 defenders, 8 fence posts in there, and the throwing lanes are really tight. And it's not very far to the end line either, especially when you're inside the 5. So that's a problem. And if you think the solution is just to run the ball in, well, that's a little bit of a problem too, because they've got more tacklers near the ball than you have blockers. So that's a little bit of a problem too. So one thing you can do to bother them a little bit more and make yourself a little more difficult to defend Is it possible you can do something to make the quarterback a bigger threat to even become a ball carrier? And the obvious answer is yeah. Put in Brendan Sullivan, because we know that he's effective in running the ball, and I hate to say he's more expendable than our starter, but obviously if we're trying to put a lot of stuff on our starter's plate, that might just simply be exposing him to more risk than he already has. So it's a little bit like sharing the position among running backs. Is there anything wrong with having a good backup running back? Of course not. Same thing can apply to quarterbacks. And the advantage when we put number one on the field, and last week was a good example. I was probably like our opponent was. I think Troy was probably thinking, okay, let's see Sullivan run the ball now. And what we did initially, we used him as a decoy. Yep. And a critic would have said, well, you put him in, you just let him hand the ball off. Yeah, but maybe Troy was expecting him to keep the ball, which made the guy with the ball better positioned to score points. So it just makes it a little more difficult to defend, because it's not quite as obvious if we're running the ball. It's not quite as obvious that it's going to be jersey number 2 or jersey number 9, whoever.
Thank you, Leeds, for the super chat. And Cole Stipulate. Good question here. Anything we can do to disguise Deshaun Lee in 2 weeks? Iowa did get to some cover 1 in the first half, left some guys on an island. Perhaps slide Cohen Intringer outside. Don, how big of a problem is that other cornerback position? I think maybe we're making too much out of that. I know people.
I do know this. Ohio State's got 2 really good receivers. I do know that. I'm sure the third one's good also.
But I don't think sliding a safety outside and putting him in isolation against one of those skilled wideouts, I think it's all hands on deck and let them battle through the bye week and figure out starting. Because Deshaun Lee started, regardless of what the NBC broadcast stated. Deshaun Lee started this game. They had TJ Hall on the screen, but it was Deshaun.
Right. I remember on the second play, I for sure saw number 8 out there, and matter of fact, number 8 did a good job on the first play. I think he was in on the tackle, because initially I thought that's good support out of TJ, and then I realized on the second play, well, that's not number 2, it's number 8, and I'm pretty sure number 8 was in for snap 1 also. I think Deshaun certainly. I think he probably graded out a little better on run than pass. He was soft, and they threw underneath, but it just didn't get us killed either. They did it a couple, 3 times, and they picked up some in general. I don't remember any of them were critical down first downs as an example. I remember one time they threw underneath him. It was 3rd and 16, and now they got 3rd and 8, whatever. I'm sorry, it was 2nd and 16. Now they got 3rd and 8. So, yeah, they picked up some yards, but it didn't kill the drive either. It didn't prevent us from getting off the field. I'll say it that way. Adam. So I do think against Ohio State, we better think long and hard before we play a lot of man against Ohio State. We better pick our spots and be careful doing it, because let's face it, if we're playing man and their guy gets the ball in space, the race is on. And, we still have a better chance to defend big plays by playing a lot of zone defense. No doubt in my mind of that. I'm sure Phil Parker will agree.
Thank you for the super chat, Adam. He says, appreciate you guys. Cade seems like a great teammate, and he has heart, needs a bit more time. 2 of the best plays of that game were his attempted block and cheering on Sullivan Jazz running hard. We mentioned that big play, third quarter, the Tim Lester call, KJ touchdown run, block by 8, attempted block by Cade, or at least willingness to run down the field and be there. I don't know if he actually laid a block down, but
I think he actually hit a guy right there around the goal line.
And then, like I said, Jacob Gill was a part of that play with his blocking on the outside as well. How about Minnesota going for it on 4th and inches in that third quarter? That was a big moment in the game. It turned out to not mean a whole lot because they converted. But you mentioned the missed tackles from Jamari Harris. That was one of the missed tackles. They had an opportunity to get that ball back within field goal range. I mean, that was a gutsy 4th and inches play call that they converted. Nice effort by the halfback, but that was an opportunity missed that at the time I thought, I hope that doesn't come back to bite Iowa, because that was an opportunity.
And I do recall that PJ took a time out there, and you've heard me say before, when you do take a time out long before the end of either half, you always wonder, is it going to come back? Are we going to need that timeout as the game winds down? Turned out they didn't, but it certainly might have been a factor in a close game.
Jack, thank you for gifting from the Hawkeye of the Storm membership. Do appreciate you doing that. That's an option. As a way you can express appreciation of the show, is gifting someone a membership, a premium membership here on the YouTube channel. So thank you, Jack. Let's go back to our Iowa Smokehouse line. We've got D. Rollifson here. D. Rollifson, welcome to the show.
Hey, guys. Love the show. You guys helped me through the Brian era, and I really thank you for that. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
You and everybody else helped me through the Brian era. So.
Oh, I know. Oh, gosh. So we were talking PJ Fleck here, and I thought I'd give the remaining people who are on the line a little quick story. So I live in the Minneapolis area. I live in Edina. One of my neighbors was saying, yeah, PJ Fleck lives kind of close to us. So I got my bike out and I rode around a little bit, found his house, and he has of course, he has the American flag and the row the boat flag and everything above his pool. And I thought, okay, that's kind of neat. He has a nice house and whatnot. And so I was riding my bike home, and 2 doors down from him, I see these really nice yellow Adirondack chairs. And I look up, and what do I see? The black and yellow Tiger Hawk flag flying. So maybe tonight when PJ gets home, he gets to see the Hawkeye flag flying in his neighbor's house.
I'm sure he loves that.
Yeah. So we can be sticking it to PJ all the time. So it's kind of cool. Anyway, that's all I had. It was one of those deep knowledge things tonight for you.
Well, I appreciate it. And it's good to know we have somebody that can be a spy if we need somebody to spy out enemy territory, D. Rollison. Appreciate that.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, sir. Oh, that's funny. Have you ever met PJ, Don?
I know PJ pretty well, actually. I knew him as a player at Northern Illinois. And when I was coaching at Western, he was a GA at the time, I believe, a grad assistant. And I'd run into him at the convention, and he always made a point of wanting to talk. So I give him credit, for trying to learn more than what he knew at that time. And he's got a sharp mind, of course, and he asked a lot of good questions. And we had a lot of conversations about, how to be an effective head coach. And it was everything from football to leadership, whatever, a lot of different things. So I've known PJ for a long time on a personal level. I'm not in touch with him now, but I don't need to give him any advice. He's getting lots of advice from Gopher fans, I'm sure. So I'm not going to offer any advice to PJ. He's got all the help he needs.
All right, let's go back to our Iowa Smokehouse line. We've got 750 Donuts of Doom. Don, wait, look at Don. He heard that name and he perked right up. It's midnight. Too late for Don. Welcome to the show, sir. Good to see you.
Oh, good to be here. Yeah. So, yeah, I appreciate you guys. Appreciate Coach Don and his perspective and everything and so forth. So, it seemed like after the first half that, I was like, wow, they're going against it here. They got the momentum against them and so forth. But once again, the Iowa coaches seem to outcoach them in the second half. So I think that the coaches really did a great job just being able to, make adjustments and whatnot. And really, Minnesota had no answers. So it seemed like maybe Iowa got away from the zone and went more to counter and gap schemes with the run game. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I need to watch the tape again, but it seemed like that was part of the strategy on offense, at least. But After that first drive, it seemed like Minnesota just got gun shy. They were really aggressive in the first half, bringing everybody and everything. They didn't do that in the second half.
Really,
So,
second quarter. I'd say really second quarter when they really got aggressive. It felt like
yeah.
Early on, Iowa's defense looked pretty good, and they come out with that nice drive off good field position. And so the point was made earlier. I had said at the outset that Iowa once again played one half of football. It's kind of the opposite of the Iowa State game. Like, they played one good quarter against Iowa State. Today they played three pretty good quarters, right, Don?
Yeah, I would think so. The only time I was a little bit discouraged was second quarter.
Yeah, and they did leave a lot to be desired there.
Yeah, I just feel like they need to be a little quicker on the adjustments for Ohio State, obviously. You can't go a whole half and then go to the halftime, make the adjustments. They're going to have to be as good as they've ever been, with that. So it seems like a lot of times, so far this year at least, there's a bad half of football and then a good half. Now, Ohio State, you're going to need more than half. You're going to need a good 3 quarters or more. So they're going to have to be quicker, or they're going to have to do a better job on their pregame game planning on what they're going to do to succeed. Obviously it's a hard row. I understand that. I'm just saying that,
let's face it, to beat the very best teams that are on your schedule, you don't have the luxury of waiting until halftime.
Exactly.
The truth of it is, you might have to make adjustments 2 or 3 times over the course of the game. And the goal is simply to try to stay one step ahead of them.
Exactly. But I think that Iowa fans should really look at this and go, wow, these are great coaches, because most teams don't make these type of pivots and adjustments in game like Iowa does. Besides the fact that they generally have, obviously the great culture, obviously the great development, but it was one of the most impressive games that I've witnessed.
We're not using the major adjustments on offense. I think that's the difference that we're seeing.
And I just think that they couldn't throw, and they still made the adjustments to win. That's pretty amazing. They were not able to throw, but they were able to at least show the boot action and things that keep Minnesota off balance. But I also think that Minnesota, they kind of coach scared a little bit. They got conservative. They probably shouldn't have. I'm just kind of thinking of both sides, I
totally disagreed with that call, and I know the crowd booed, and sometimes I feel like crowd needs to understand time and place. I thought it was a stupid play when you're down. What were they down, 10 or 14, Don? And they ran third and 10. I thought that was way too conservative, and I totally understand Minnesota fans being upset. I don't know if you felt the same way, Don.
Yeah, I wrote down 3rd and 10. Minnesota runs the ball from very little yardage, advantage Iowa. I think at that point the game was over.
Yeah.
I think their spirit was broken at that point.
I agree.
Before the even fourth quarter started, it was they needed to be more aggressive before then, and so it's a little surprising, I guess. I guess that maybe they. Knowing when you play Iowa, you can't make mistakes. And I feel like maybe in some way that's in PJ's head, that we're not going to make mistakes. We're not going to throw another interception. We're not going to do something that puts them in a position, and it sort of handcuffed them. I don't know. Yeah. But all to say is that I think that Iowa fans need to kind of look at this game and go, wow, that is part of what makes Iowa great. Is that was great, subtle adjustments at halftime. And they continue to do. They what Iowa was aggressive from the start of the second half. I mean, I was really impressed. They came out and were like angry, angry that they were down. And I was like, okay, this is great, but it's not atypical. That is common, but also this was kind of the epitome of, wow, this is why you have the coaches you have.
Yeah, that was a key point in the game. If I'm not mistaken, that very first possession, second half, probably took, no more than 3 minutes, 4 minutes to score. It was a pretty quick drive.
Well, you have a couple of chunk plays through the air. That's what that can do. And that's why I keep saying, like it was mentioned earlier, I know this seems like I'm stating the obvious, Don, but if the passing game can start clicking, this is a very good run team right now, right? Am I right in saying Iowa's a very good run team right now?
Well, we appear to be. I thought today was a pretty good test, and we passed it with flying colors.
Exactly. So imagine with a passing game. They're doing this, Don, without teams giving Iowa much respect through the air. What do you do when you start hitting some big plays down the field? I mean,
well, you heard me talk about before. One of the things we always tried to sell in selling our offense, with our best offenses, I would make this statement to a recruit: we're the kind of offense that can run for 300 one weekend, throw for 300 the next. That's when you got a good offense.
Yeah.
You can beat them left-handed or right-handed. Doesn't matter.
By the way, Donuts of Doom, was that a name given at birth, or was that a married name?
That was a fraternity name given to me. So yeah. So it's hey, roll with it. So just remember in 2009, 2010, when Iowa went to Ohio State, they came out with 3 tight ends, and they really took it to Ohio State the whole first half. So I expect Ferentz to have something ready for Ohio State. That was obviously a great team that they had then, but I'm interested to see what he does to, that they're not ready for with 2 weeks to prepare.
Right.
Tim Lester helps. Appreciate the call, sir.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Angela, thank you for the super chat. Angela, hit the like button. Great show as always. Go Hawks. Thank you, Angela. Very much appreciated. I got to share something here, and I hope this doesn't get our show demonetized. Probably is not worth me doing this, but got to do it anyways, Don, because this just happened here within the last hour, a little over an hour ago. Baylor was leading Colorado 31-24. 2 seconds left. Colorado had the ball at the Baylor 44-yard line. Again, 2 seconds left. Baylor up 7. And I'll just share my screen here so you can see this, Don. I just want you to watch this play. 3rd and 10. Walk us through what happens here, Don. Shedeur Sanders rolls out left, takes a shot to the end zone, and somehow, some way, the pass is completed to LaJohntay Wester. Colorado ends up forcing overtime on that catch in a rainy Boulder, Colorado.
Wow.
And
what happened in overtime?
And Colorado wins in overtime.
My theory, I don't know this, but my theory, of course, which makes sense, the team that puts the game in overtime, you would think would win more often than not. I'm not sure what the numbers show, but I would be curious. Wouldn't that make sense?
Especially on a Hail Mary.
Yeah, especially if it's that desperate a situation.
Demoralizing a little bit. Retro Sports Vision says, hey, Coach Patterson, one play Charlie Jones, 1981, 1 catch for 51 yards against Lee Corso and Indiana. We've talked about that,
That's
Charlie.
all true, yep.
Then he's educating you now, Don. Retro Sports Vision says, Coach Don, your best game was 1990 versus Illinois, 54-28.
That was a good one. I'll tell the story, Corey. Those that haven't heard it, we spent time in the month of March working on our game plan for Illinois the next fall, simply because they were that good. And when we played them, it was a showdown game, pretty much guaranteed to be for the Big Ten title. And that Illinois team, the previous 3 weeks, had been on the field for 42 possessions and given up exactly 1 touchdown. So what happened in the game at Illinois? We scored touchdowns the first 4 possessions. And then when they finally stopped us, we ran the infamous fake field goal for another touchdown. That's Coach Fry's greatest call ever, I think. It wasn't even an offensive play. It was a fake field goal when you're ahead by, I think it was 28-10 or something at the time. But Coach Fry knew 28 is not enough. Let's go ahead and take 35.
Don, I texted you before the game started. I gave you my score prediction just so it was out there, and I had posted it on the YouTube channel prior to the start of the game. What was that score prediction, Don?
I think you said 24-10 or something. 24-14.
You're close. 27-10.
27-10. You were close.
Pretty darn close, Don.
Not bad.
I felt good about this. Now, I did not expect Iowa to be trailing at halftime. But, hey, you get there one way or the other, and a 3-score win on the road at Minnesota is an impressive one. And, hey, Iowa might make their way back, and not that it matters, but by the time they get to the Ohio State game, they might make it back into the polls because they weren't far out. Not that, again, it doesn't matter, but they may end up in the top 25 for that Ohio State game. It'll be interesting to see when that game is played, Don, because they've not announced the starting time for the Hawkeyes and the Buckeyes yet. So I'm guessing it'll be big noon. I talked with Mark Rogers about this the other day. That week is pretty light, and of course, Fox loves Ohio State, so maybe we get that as a big noon game on Fox. Matt says, what average stat line does Cade need to be at to have a successful outing? What's reasonable?
Well, it depends on the game situation.
Game by game, right?
Yeah. Today we didn't need, we had so much success with our running game, and we developed a lead that was very secure in the second half. We didn't need to throw the ball very much. On the other hand, if we're playing from behind by 2 touchdowns, we may have no choice but to try to somehow make the game last longer. And best way to do that, of course, is to throw the ball and hopefully complete a lot of them too. So that's why you end up, just for the record, Corey, those 25 parameters that I keep track of for every game, the lowest 2 winning percentages happen to be passing yardage and more completions. Those are ranked 24th and 25th. That's how insignificant passing yardage really is.
We don't like seeing 62 yards.
Don't like to see 62, but you don't like to see, let's just pick a number. You don't like to see 200 that's based on 50 pass attempts either, because that's 4 yards per attempt. That's not good.
I'd rather see 62 passing yards versus 62 rush yards for Iowa.
Yeah, that's true.
Let's go back to our Iowa Smokehouse line. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson, who's on the line.
Yeah, hi, this is Zach Nixon. How are you guys?
Hey, Zach. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing pretty good. I met you at the Kinnick Kids Day.
Absolutely.
And I just wanted to, we were talking about county fairs and all that stuff, and I just thought it was, it's just great to finally be on the show with you and Coach, and I love the show, and I love watching everything you guys do every week. It's awesome, guys. So thank you for what you do.
Well, appreciate that, Zach, and thank
you.
For the support.
Yeah, so the first thing I want to say is I'm super happy that we're actually fulfilling Brian Ferentz's contract of over 25 points per game.
No, I don't think anybody else has said that before you. So that's
great. It's crazy. We're fulfilling the contract right now. But one of my main questions I have right now is, we're not seeing a lot of X on the field, and honestly, we're not really seeing a lot of Castro as well. We're seeing a lot of Entringer and a lot of Kyle Fisher. So, I guess, Coach, what's the explanation for that? Because I mean, X is a 5-star, and he had the interception in the bowl game a few years back, and he's obviously a great football player, and obviously Castro might be the best defensive player we've got besides Jay Higgins, honestly. So I guess what's your explanation of maybe what's going on there right now?
I think Phil Berger would tell you I go by results, and truthfully, Xavier missed more tackles than Phil wants him to miss. That's for sure. That's the truth. Sometimes a 5-star doesn't play as well as a 5-star should play. And Xavier has great potential, and I certainly hope he maxes out on that potential before he leaves Iowa. But the bottom line, I'm sure the players will tell you, the coaches explain it this way: the players that play the best will play the most. And if you're not playing well enough, then maybe I'll give some other player at your position a chance to excel, because I'm not happy with your level of play right now. That's just the honest to God truth. That's the way it works. You got to produce. And it really doesn't matter how many stars you have. Nobody, when the game starts, nobody even cares how many stars you might have had. It's just all about playing better than your opposition and doing it with great consistency.
Yeah, no, and it's nice to see, they are getting Castro. I mean, Castro, I'm an O lineman, so I watch the O line a lot. But every once in a while I'll check that backfield and on the defense, and you'll see even Castro playing a little bit of that safety spot too, as well as entering her. So, maybe that's how they're trying to get Castro in a little more, and maybe, because he's not really. I haven't really noticed them. I guess maybe I'm not really a defensive-minded guy. I'm more of an offensive-minded guy. We ran the block gap backer when we were on the O-line and stuff like that. But, is there a reason maybe we haven't been playing a lot of cash, or are we playing cash and maybe I'm just not noticing it?
I think Castro is probably playing more than you realize. I do remember I wrote down this note: great job of playing the quarterback's eyes by Castro. It was broken up. It wasn't far from intercepted. Castro had a great break on that ball. I don't know if you remember the play. It was maybe late third quarter, early fourth. And it was a nice play on his part. That guy, he's fun to watch because he misses very few tackles, and he does a great job of reading the quarterback's eyes.
Don, does Kyler Fisher have a chance at making a team in the league?
Oh, gosh, I don't pretend to know enough about Kyler. I think, let me say it this way, making a team, let's face it, I think it's still 53. Isn't it still a 53-man roster?
Yeah, and he'll get into a camp. I don't want to. He'll get into a camp, but I'm just curious.
Here's the truth. There's a thing called a salary cap, and what that means is that those 51st, 52nd, and 53rd players on your team, they're not getting nearly the money that some other people are getting. And so the bottom line is some of those players have to be not so well known, I guess you could say. And in that regard, if you get into camp, sure, you have a chance to make the team. It's not going to be easy because how many guys are released? A lot more than get to stay. I don't know how many they start with, but some guys, of course, have their position locked up, but others have to win it in camp. And that's a challenge. And I think, let's face it, Castro could be a really good special teams player. I'm not saying he couldn't end up starting in the NFL, but you just have to, and this is what coaches do, you have to understand the strengths and weaknesses of your players, and then you try to be sure you don't ask them to do things they're going to have difficulty doing. A classic example for Iowa years ago, we had a strong safety by the name of Jay Norvell. Jay Norvell was first team All Big Ten. But the rest of the story, Jay Norvell couldn't run very well. So guess what? We were really, really hesitant to ask Jay to play man coverage. We played a lot of zone coverage, and Jay Norvell cover 3 was our primary coverage. He was a flat defender. He could do it really well. He was a fierce tackler. He had the heart of a lion. He was a great competitor, a little bit along the lines of Bobby Stoops. So great coaches are very, very aware of what their players cannot do. And the best coaches don't put their players in position to get beat. And if that means they have to eliminate a few calls, then that's what they do. Because good teams will take advantage of you if you ask your players to do things that they can't do. They'll find them and they'll take advantage of them.
Well, Zach, we appreciate you calling in, sir, and it was great meeting you. Appreciate your support, and please don't be a stranger to the call-in line.
Yeah, no problem, guys. One last thing before I go. I was able to talk to LeVar Woods at the stadium, and I work with his cousin's wife, the Mason family, and I think you've probably seen here recently, Kinnick in Iowa City has put in the program and have put out different things about autistic, sensory rooms that will be coming out here soon at Kinnick Stadium. And, I just want, all the fans out there of Iowa to know that, these are coming and, to be full support of it, for kids that do have autism and the sensory issues. And obviously we know Kinnick gets very loud. These rooms will be a place for these kids to go and for parents to still be able to enjoy the game and stuff like that. So, LeVar Woods has been heading this with the university and Kinnick Stadium because of my coworkers' family and stuff like that. So if anyone gets the opportunity to support it, help with the cause and stuff like that, because it's a really cool deal. But guys, thank you, Coach and Corey. I know it's getting late, it's past midnight where I'm at here. So thank you guys, and just keep up the good work. It's an awesome show every week, and I listen every time. Thanks, guys.
You, sir. Appreciate it,
Thank
Zach.
you.
Good stuff too about the plug for that cause and for the support that LeVar and his family have given toward it. It is a cool initiative. It's funny. I want to give everybody a quick scoreboard update. Before we do, I want to make sure we give a plug to one of our sponsors, and that's RTI Threads. If you've not checked out the merchandise, we've got like 330 people. If everybody just bought one piece of clothing from one of these 4 athletes on this banner, imagine the effect it would have NIL-wise. It'd be quite an effect. So check it all out. RTIthreads.com. Shop the Gravedigger Aaron Graves, Jacob Gill, Carson Shire, Zach Lutmer. All those guys are playing, folks. Carson and Zach, future defensive stars potentially, and they are big pieces of what I was doing on special teams. Jacob Gill still doesn't have a drop, Don. Still doesn't have a drop. Other guys are starting to get a few drops here and there. His drop percentage is a big goose egg, and that's good to know. Aaron Graves continues to put in solid work in the interior alongside Y.A. Black and Jeremiah Pittman. Shop the apparel line and the merch lines for all those guys, rtithreads.com. How about a scoreboard update for everybody? How about this one live in action? We've only got 2 FBS games still going, 3 FBS games, excuse me. We've got Liberty and East Carolina, close game in the fourth quarter. It's 28-24 Liberty. But how about this one? Number 13, Kansas State getting torched on the road. Very difficult place to play. Provo. At BYU, 38-9.
I've coached a game in Provo. It's a good home crowd. It's a big stadium.
And when you talk about those late games, Don, how about this one? Northern Iowa. They're out in Hawaii this weekend. It's 22-7 at halftime. So, aloha. How about, last few weeks I've talked about some of the it seems like we've had more low-scoring games. I mean, you bring up the Minnesota-North Carolina game week 1. You had the Texas A&M Notre Dame game. Was that week 2? It seems like there's been more of those games. But how about this week has been the opposite. This week we've had just unbelievable high-scoring games. We start with a game I texted you about last night that ended late last night. Washington State beating San Jose State in double overtime, 54-52. 54-52. And, oh, by the way, South Alabama put up 48 at App State on Thursday. Oregon State put up 38 against Purdue. Boise State put up 56 today. You've got Colorado and Baylor today in overtime. That game totaled, 69 points.
But here's the one that got me, Corey. You heard me say today. Somehow James Madison put 70 on North Carolina.
And North Carolina scored 50.
Right.
Did you see that? Did you hear the reports that Mac Brown reportedly, let me read you. I want to make sure I get this right because I know Mac Brown, you have a lot of respect for Mac Brown, but let me read you.
I've known Mac for a long time.
let me read you the report out there that surfaced after the game. According to a reporter, an emotional Mac Brown told the North Carolina football team that he was walking away from the job after the Tar Heels' embarrassing 70-50 loss to James Madison. Multiple sources close to the situation told Inside Carolina. Hours later, another source close to the situation emphasized the 73-year-old college football Hall of Famer, who long has taken losses hard in their immediate aftermath, isn't resigning or quitting his college coaching position. He will be in the office tomorrow and getting back to work, the source told Inside Carolina Saturday night, going in and having a normal Sunday. Hey, 73 years old doesn't mean you don't take losses any more lightly, Don, does it?
So what does that mean? He said it, but he didn't mean it? What that means?
I guess he can do whatever he wants. He's got some history there.
Yeah, he does.
Quite a game, Utah, Oklahoma State. The Utes pulling that one out, coming back and winning 22-19.
Help me with this score, Corey. I was very curious. How about purple versus purple? Northwestern at Washington.
Great question. Northwestern, Washington. Final there was Washington 24, Northwestern 5. So
24-5.
Quite a defensive performance from the Huskies. Northwestern on the night had just 53 passing yards and 59 rushing yards.
Wow.
So I don't think that's a very good Northwestern team right now. I think that's fair to say. That's a Washington team that just lost to Washington State a week prior, and
right.
It's a Washington State team that, just struggled, took 2 overtimes to beat San Jose State at home.
It's amazing how the outcome can be so different from one week to the next.
It is. And how about tell you what, a lot of overtime games this week, Don. I mentioned San Jose State and Washington State that kicked things off, but how about that was a double overtime game? How about Illinois, Nebraska? Brett Bielema, congratulations to Bert, as our good friend Ryan likes to call him. A 31-24 in overtime there. Dylan Raiola kind of self-destructs in overtime, but really solid effort from the Illini. Mentioned Colorado with the Hail Mary there to send that game against Baylor into overtime, and the Buffs win in overtime. Another bad loss for the Big Ten. Michigan State falling to Boston College today, not in overtime, but a close one, 23-19. You had Texas A&M survive a real scare. The 25th ranked Aggies defeating Bowling Green 26-20. Big game down in Norman, 25-15. The road upset for Tennessee, 25-15 over Oklahoma. You had an overtime game between Tulsa and Louisiana Tech. Tulsa coming out on top there. Let's see, there are a couple other overtime games. Buffalo, how about this one? A team you used to.
I'm aware.
You coached for the Bulls. 23-20 over a Northern Illinois team that was ranked in the top 25 and had quite a performance against Notre Dame earlier this year.
And Pete Limbo is an old friend of mine, former FCS coach, and he's going to do. I said as the game came up, I knew they were playing over in DeKalb, right?
Yes.
Buffalo beat them in DeKalb. I said, if it wasn't quite that far away, because we were out of town on Friday as well. I said I'd love to go see the game because it wouldn't surprise me at all if Buffalo knocks them off, and sure enough they did. Next week, Buffalo plays UConn, matter of fact. My money's on the Bulls again next week.
19th ranked Louisville taking down Georgia Tech 31-19. You have, how about this one? This one surprised me a little bit, even though it was a 17-point win. Number 16 LSU beating UCLA 34-17, but that game was in Baton Rouge, and after what Indiana did to UCLA out in the great state of California, I thought that was going to be a bloodbath. UCLA competed better than I would have anticipated.
I remember at the half it was very close because Brian Kelly was not very happy at the end of the half.
Well, one thing UCLA does not do well is run the ball. They had 22 rush attempts for a total of 14 yards. I know sacks are taken into account and all that. How about Michigan taking down USC in the final seconds of that game, 27-24? You have Spencer Petras and the Aggies. Petras makes his return, and his numbers. How about this, Don? Petras threw 44 times. 44 times, an average of 6.7 yards per attempt, 293 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 INT, QBR of 28.7.
How can it be so low?
Well, he's 26 of 44, Don.
That's more than 50%. Good for a lot of yards. I don't get it.
How is QBR figured?
Well, I guess that's different than passing efficiency.
It's different than passer rating.
Well, passing efficiency is what I go by more than anything else. I don't understand the different ratings. But the bottom line, the numbers didn't sound that bad.
He did fumble. He did fumble once.
Yeah.
That's something to do with it.
And the team won or lost?
No, they lost by 16 at a Temple team that was 0-3 heading into the game. I mean, that's not good at all. I'm not trying to beat up on Spencer. That's not good. How about Joe Labus? Comeback victory, Don. Comeback victory for Joey Labus. He leads his team back 14-20, 185 yards, 9.3 yards per attempt, and 1 touchdown. Solid day for Joey Labus, who really has been struggling of late. Had a game of 5 interceptions here.
Is that Central Michigan?
Central Michigan over Ball State, 37-34.
That's a good win. That's a MAC win.
Absolutely. West Virginia over Kansas, 32-28. Cincinnati shutting the door on Houston, 34-0. We mentioned James Madison, North Carolina. How about Indiana? They're a scary team right now. And Charlotte's not great, but 52-14, another lopsided win. And Indiana's done. They're scoring a lot of points. I mean, they scored 77 against your old Leathernecks. They scored 42 at UCLA and then 52 at home against Charlotte. They're one of the best scoring offenses in the country right now. And, I mean, look, I know Western Illinois hadn't won a game in like 3 years. But they scored 31 on FIU, and then the other 2 games, you got an AAC team and a Big Ten team, and that was a road game. Those are impressive numbers for a first-year coach.
I saw a lot of that UCLA game, and I was very impressed with Indiana.
Clemson putting up 59, taking down the Wolfpack of North Carolina State. Ohio State over Marshall, 49-14. Florida on the road, taking down Mississippi State, 45-28. So that's your a scoreboard update of sorts here. And we're heading into the final few moments of the show. We lost our last caller, I think. No, we've got our caller here on hold on our Iowa Smokehouse line. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson, who's on the line.
Hey, guys, this is John. Did you guys happen to see the James Madison, North Carolina score?
Yeah, we were just talking about that, John. 120 points scored.
Yeah. Sorry, my internet's out, and I had to hang up to call or quit watching. So
you're good. Yeah, quite a number of high-scoring games, but that's the cherry on top. And you heard what we talked about, what Mac Brown said. He said apparently told a reporter or told someone that he was done, and then a couple hours later he changed his mind.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you'll have to read about it.
I seen that, and I thought that's more like a basketball score than it is a football score.
I was going to say that James Madison won because they were hitting their 3-point shots better than North Carolina.
50. How about that?
Speaking of which, there's a playoff game involving Caitlin tomorrow.
There absolutely is. Connecticut and Indiana.
Yes.
You know Mac Brown?
I do.
He's a quality individual and a quality coach to me.
Yes, he is. I've known Mac ever since he was an assistant at Iowa State. That's back in the 80s.
Oh, all right. Well, I'll let you go. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, John.
Bye.
All right, good stuff. Our RTI Threads player of the game tonight. I think this is an appropriate fit, don't you think, Don?
It's a good choice.
21 carries, 206, 3 touchdowns, and this guy is leading the country. Don, is he a Heisman candidate right now? I know it's too early, but is he?
No, not yet.
Don't say no. No, don't say no. Come on. Don't say no, Don. Don't
you gotta do it in more than 4 games.
Right. I said right now. Right now.
Right now, I don't think there are any Heisman candidates.
Oh.
Let's wait till October.
So why? So, okay. guess what? The networks don't agree with you because they like to talk about the playoff in week 2. They like to talk about their projected playoff after week 2.
But that doesn't make it right.
It doesn't make it right.
Let me change the subject for a minute. Here's something worth mentioning. We haven't touched on it. Today, with his successful kick, Drew is now 6 for 6 on the year. And that was a big, important score because
it was a long kick, too. It was almost 50 yards.
46 yards. It was 21-14 at that time. So as you know, Corey, there's a big difference in a 10-point lead and a 7-point lead. So that was a big kick, and he just drilled it. It was right down the middle. So I'm really happy for Drew that he responded well again today. Didn't surprise me. Didn't surprise you either.
Don, he got apparently stung by a bee on his kicking foot. And I was also told he's been sick. He's been very ill. So, whatever. You got one job. I guess you can, if you're good enough, you can tune the rest out.
He's very ill, which means his range was only 55 yards or what? What do you?
A bee sting on your kicking foot. Is that a new one, Don?
Never heard of that one. I suspect it was a bee from Minnesota.
Yeah, there you go. It was actually a gopher bite. So, all right. Again, RTI Threads player of the game, none other than Caleb Johnson, who I think is on Heisman watch, Don. I'm not saying he's going to win it. I'm just saying
he's on your Heisman watch.
He should. Yeah, he's on my. I think if you're the leading rusher, and I mean, we haven't seen the stats finalized yet because you got a few games still going. He's got to be the clear number 1 rusher in the country. Not like I'm guessing there's nobody even close. Am I right in saying that, Don?
Probably. You know what I like? How demoralizing is this if you're Minnesota? Johnson gets tired, and then Patterson goes in, and Patterson's very effective carry after carry after carry also.
True.
That's impressive to have that as a 1-2 punch.
And Don, let's not forget, he didn't play. Jazz Patterson didn't play the first couple of weeks.
Right.
Oh, I sound like he was maybe out. This is suspension. He was also hurt. But hey, Kamari Moulton didn't see a snap today. Sounded like maybe he was working off concussion protocol. He was not listed on the injury report. LaShawn was out with an injury. So this is why you need 4 backs or more. But boy, they're using all of them, Don. And how good of a job has Liddell Betts done as Iowa's running backs coach since he got hired here? I think he's done a stellar job.
I think he has too. A lot of people wonder how does Iowa manage to keep all those backs around? It all starts with the relationship that the coach has with the players. There's no doubt in my mind they like and respect Liddell, as they should. Let's face it, he's very fair when he doles out playing time. He doesn't really care about the politics that relate to your family or anyone else. The best players are going to play the most. And if you're second on the list, you better be ready because you're going to play. And if you're third on the list, you're probably going to play too. So it's the way it should be. He doesn't play favorites. The best guys get to play the most.
Brian, I appreciate your comment, but I disagree. He says, I love KJ's performance, but someone needs to coach him on interviews. Too many eyes. Okay, I don't know. I haven't heard the interview.
I have.
Do you agree with this statement, Don?
I can see where Brian might say that. Some guys do such a great job of giving credit to their teammates and credit to their coaches for that matter. And but he was, in his defense, he's still barely in his 20s. He's still a young man, and he was excited about the way the game played out, as he should be. First time he'd ever run for 200, I believe.
And let me just say, you have made a point of saying to me you've been impressed with Caleb in interviews here in the last few
Absolutely.
weeks, giving his teammates credit.
Absolutely. I think he was just answering the question, whatever the question was. And he was exuberant over the fact that we beat him and looked pretty good doing it. Let's face it, if you can run for 300, you're going to, maybe not 300, but pretty close, I bet. You're going to win a lot of games if you run for 300 yards.
So as of heading into this week, Caleb Johnson was at 479 yards. Ashton Genty of Boise State was sitting at 459. And as I mentioned, Boise State did score a lot of points. They played Portland State today. And Genty ran for 127 yards. So Caleb's got him beat by a lot. At UCF, did they play today, Don? I don't believe they did. He's next on the list, would be RJ Harvey of UCF. If they did, I'm not seeing them. So no, he's going to be the undisputed leader here heading into next week. Now they do have a bye week, so he's going to fall down.
So based on yards per game, he's going to be still number one.
Well, I'm not basing it on yards per game. I'm looking at total yards, Don.
Don't do that.
Well, at the end of the year, okay, fine, whatever. Yes,
Well,
yards per game. Yes, I understand.
If some guys played 5 games and someone else played 4, that's not fair.
No, I know. It all works itself out by the end of the season, though, Don. Assuming everybody plays the same amount of games. All right, Chase. He's on our Iowa Smokehouse line. Chase, welcome.
Hey, how are you guys?
Doing good,
Chase,
man.
how's your day going?
I'm tired, but I just wanted to say I watched the game today, and I was really happy to see Iowa be able to move the ball against a Big Ten team, and they had over 300 yards of total offense, which was great. I mean, I know we played Iowa State, but just to be able to see them up against another Big Ten team, move the ball as well as they did as the second half. I know the first half was a little bit rough. It's a newer offense with a new offensive coordinator. Some of that stuff's going to take time, and I know a lot of people in the comments the first half, like even on Facebook pages, you can get on there. Hawkeye Heaven is a good one, and people just roast whoever they can get a hold of in the first half of the game. And it's kind of disappointing because how well they did play the second half, but it's a new offense. They did great the second half, and I was happy with it.
Were you at the game, you said, Chase?
No, I was not at the game. I watched the game here, and
okay.
No, I wish I was at the game. I usually do go up to that game because I got family that live in Farmington. It's like 20 minutes south of the city. But
yeah, I had the sneaking suspicion that there'd be a lot of people that we've had several people in the chat say they were at the game. It's the only road game, Don, all season that's relatively close. They got a road schedule that's, they got UCLA on the road. They got East Lansing, which is a long drive out. They got Columbus. They get a game at College Park. They don't have, they don't get the Illini and the Huskers and Madison. All those games are, some of them, they don't play the Illini this year. And they get Wisconsin and Nebraska at home. So road schedule is not real friendly for people that like to travel.
Right.
I thought it was really good to see Reese Fanzi get a catch again. I mean, those last couple of games have been pretty rough for him. Just to see him acquire a catch again was I think it was a big deal for him and for all Hawkeye fans.
I agree. It was nice to see. And it was a big catch, as Don mentioned earlier. And again, you love seeing a young guy, Don, being able to utilize his size. And, you start to wonder, we heard about how he just caught everything his way in camp, and he showed that week 1. And since then, we've seen some drops creep into his game. So it was good to see him get back on the horse in spite of maybe some negative thoughts that could have easily been going through his mind.
You're right. I know they even commented that in the Iowa State game, he'd been really roughed up some by the defenders for Iowa State. And he realized, I've got to be able to deal with this better than they did. In his mind, he probably could have handled the pressure that they put on him better than he did. But he's young. He's got plenty of time to develop into a really fine player.
Absolutely.
And then last thing before I go here. So if it wasn't for that Jay Higgins pick in the, I don't know if it was first quarter. I think it's first quarter. There's a chance that there was a possibility that we may not even have scored the first half. Coach, do you know if is there a philosophy behind why this has happened or why that happened today? Like, what was the big deal with the slowish start? And they kind of come and go sometimes too. And even in the first 3 games, I know I just said it's a new offense, but you think maybe it's a play calling thing or what's your opinion?
first quarter, real quick, not to interject, first quarter of Iowa State was totally different. They came out and scored 3 different possessions. They just couldn't convert in the red zone on 2 of them.
Right. The main thing was just like, like I know every team has they hit kind of bottom during a game, but I feel like sometimes Iowa still linger on a little bit longer than maybe sometimes you think it should.
Don, how do you get consistency there besides developing some semblance of a passing game once you hit the Ohio State game?
Well, I think maybe Minnesota surprised us. Maybe the impression I got is we didn't expect as much man coverage as we were getting, as much 5-man rush as we were getting, and we didn't handle it very well. There were Case halftime stats, I believe, were 7 of 13 for 16 yards, and a lot of those, we didn't have plays called that were designed to defeat man coverage. So what you ended up with a lot of the time, we're getting more pressure than what we expected. And now, because we're running out of time, we're just throwing the ball to a guy that's running a zip route. That's a route simply into the flat, coming out of the backfield, or a tight end. He's running laterally. The guy's manned up on him, so the guy's chasing him. The ball comes out, and the tackler gets there shortly thereafter, and we gain 3 yards. It's that kind of stuff. But the problem with it, some of the time it was first down or second and long, and now it's third and long, and now it ends up with us having to punt the ball again. So I'm guessing Minnesota hit us with more man coverage than what we expected. That's the impression I had. And the good news is that we made an adjustment at halftime to take advantage of them, and we threw more on early downs, which helped. And of course, we were still able to bust any number of explosive plays in the run game.
And I think a big thing of Iowa's success is making sure that you don't go down into 2nd and 10 or 2nd and 11 for negative yards. Because I think more than 80% of the time, if we're 2nd and 5 or under, we usually convert and we move on to a new set of downs. But I think just getting behind in the change is our biggest enemy right now, going into the Ohio State game.
Yeah. We're not – it's hard for people to execute on 3rd and long. But having said that, we're probably below average in that category. We're not going to change it overnight because it requires great protection and requires receivers that are getting open and passes that are accurately thrown. It's not easy to convert from 3rd and long, but that's what the best pass offenses do. They still convert.
But Don, I would like to Chase's point. I'd like to see a little bit more variation on first down. We saw a little bit more of that in the second half, but I'd like to see a little bit more of that early. That's one thing, Chase, maybe remedy-wise, maybe they look at and maybe we come out early in games and throw a little bit more on first down. Now, they got to be the right throws, right? But I don't know. I just feel like maybe they get a little bit into a rut running Caleb on first down over and over again.
Oh yeah, and then sometimes you run Caleb right up the middle, and it doesn't just go anywhere, which is fine because it seems like the next play they'll do the same thing, and it goes for 15 yards. It's confusing. But anyways, I really appreciate you guys taking my call at 1 in the morning. So you guys have a good night.
Get some sleep. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Yeah, see you guys.
Take care.
All right. We're going to go quick fire on these last few comments in the chat. Then we're going to send Coach to bed, and I'm going to send myself to bed. Kyle Hawk says, Coach P, I thought 12, Cade McNamara managed the game and did what was asked. How can we get his confidence going in the right direction?
Maybe throw a little more on early downs, high percentage passes. Maybe take advantage of some play action opportunities. Right now, I wish we had more play action than we have. We roll out a lot, with Nathan. That's a good thing to do, of course, the way our offense is set up. But I think just give Cade a chance to get outside the pocket. I think he's a little more comfortable throwing on the run, perhaps. And what would help us a lot with any quarterback's confidence is try to avoid 3rd and long, 3rd and extra long. That's hard. Hard to play quarterback then. It's hard to be a good play caller, too, if you're looking at a lot of 3rd and long, 3rd and extra long.
Jason wants to know, is Seth Anderson able to return after the bye week? Maybe.
I don't know.
Hard to know what his role will be if he's back healthy. You know, all these guys they're playing at receiver. I just kind of be a guessing game, right? To know how much he'd be involved.
Yeah, it's a long season. And sometimes a guy that's not really thought much about it all, a few weeks later, he's the star of the game. It happens that way sometimes. That's just the nature of the sport. You know, a guy's going along, he's not playing. A good example might be Kamari. You know, you haven't heard much from Kamari lately because he's been dinged up. Who's to say he won't be our leading rusher in another 3 weeks? We don't know. It's the beauty of football. You got to get yourself ready for the opportunity, and hopefully you're able to take advantage of it when it comes.
And again, really impressed by Jazz Patterson's stick-to-itiveness because he wasn't playing through the first couple of weeks, and that had to be discouraging, but he's playing now. David says, Coach B, did Iowa run more 11 and 12 personnel today?
More 11 and 12. We always run a lot of 11 and 12, and I think we did again today. It seemed like it was maybe not quite as much as normal. Not quite as much, maybe 12 personnel. I'm not sure. Good question. Not sure. There's a lot of too tights, though, no doubt about it.
Jen says, do you think Caleb Brown will get a chance here in 2 weeks? I sure hope so. I hope he gets a chance the rest of the season, right?
Well, we need all hands on deck for Ohio State.
Sure.
And any player you can think of that's been a little bit out of the limelight, Caleb's a good example. We know that Caleb, if things fall the way we hope they do, he has the capacity to give us big plays. And we certainly need some big plays to beat a team as good as Ohio State.
The one and only Mark Rogers says, you guys outlasted me tonight. I wrapped up at 2:05 Eastern. Solid win for the Hawkeyes. Rushing attack is impressive. So thank you, Mark. Appreciate you being here. Who didn't think we'd outlast Mark? With all due respect to Mark, this show's a marathon. Although Mark's job shouldn't be over because we still got Hawaii. Hawaii just scored on Northern Iowa. It's 28-7 in the third quarter. Are they the Rainbow Warriors, Don? How do I know? Why do I know that? Anyways, let's go. How about this? Retro Sports Vision is giving you a history lesson on yourself. He says Bill Brazier was the DC in Don's time.
That's true.
Did you know that, Don?
I was aware of it, and I hadn't forgotten it.
And then he goes on to say, Coach Patterson, the win in Ann Arbor, 1990.
That's one of my favorite games. I've talked about it before. We won't dwell on it, but it was a good win, primarily because we had to go 85 yards at the end of the game to beat them in the big house, and we did it. And we never even got to third down. Think about that. Wouldn't have been such a big deal except Matt Rogers, when I reminded him, Corey, you've heard this story. I reminded him, Matt, don't forget, third down's not any longer critical, meaning we got 4 downs. His response was, Coach, we're not going to need third down. And I remember thinking, son, it's Michigan. We're probably going to need all 4. But it's true. 9 plays, 85 yards. No third downs, no fourth downs.
Well,
that's good football.
Georgia says, Georgia Reload, does the Arkansas State massacre help Iowa? I don't really think so.
What was the final? I heard it was, 31-0 at the half, maybe?
I think it was 38. It was like 58-7, 52-7, something like that.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't Arkansas State play, was it Michigan? Who am I thinking of? Seemed like they played somebody in the Big Ten.
No, you're thinking of Fresno State. I don't know who Arkansas State. Let me see.
Okay, maybe there's no ties to the Big Ten.
No, you're right. They did play Michigan. You're right. They did play Michigan.
10 points or something.
28-18.
Yeah. So think about that. You know, Iowa State's a pretty good football team. I know we hate to admit that, some of us, but I'll happily admit it. I mean, they're a quality football team.
Yeah, 28-18. And Mark says that he remembers the 1990 Iowa-Michigan game. So, Mark, I gotta tell you, but Mark's gonna have to tell you about his new book, Don, that will be dropping in late October. And all about, well, I'll just say it's all about 1990s football. And Mark is big on the disputed national championships and everything, the history of college football that you would love. So you're going to enjoy reading that book. It drops on October 29th. So
all I remember is we were not picked to be very good that year. I think we were picked 7th in the conference, and we won the whole thing.
1990. Can you believe that's 34 years ago, Don? Now we're gonna reflect on.
Remember his Corey? I had hair color like yours.
I've seen your hair back then. You did, yeah. You did have hair like me. Although a lot of those pictures were black and white, Don.
Well, get a look at this because someday that's going to be you.
Thanks a lot, Don. No, I'm kidding. Okay, so here we go. I think we're good to go here. What we want to do before we wrap this up, again, Iowa defeating Minnesota 31-14. I had 2 final notes. I saved my 2 major complaints or main complaints to the end of the show, Don. One, a play that really annoyed me. Into the second quarter, checking down to Luke Lachey with like 4 seconds left. Why are you checking down to Luke Lachey when you're trying to get in scoring position? What good does that do? Throw the ball away. Throw the ball at his feet. Right?
Yeah, it was.
You killed any opportunity you had at potentially having time to do something. I'm surprised they even ran a play on that last play of the half. I mean, they were nowhere near scoring range, and you're not within range for a Hail Mary.
It was a lousy way to end a half.
Fourth quarter, Don. Here's my complaint. Why is Cade still in the game up 17 with 5 minutes left?
I'm sorry, what's that?
Why is Cade still in the game up 17 with 5 minutes left?
Well, let's face it, if the other guy goes in, he'll just get to hand the ball off.
That's true. I thought about that. I did write down the Higgins interception. Really impressive. Horrible Brosemer throw. And how about a shout out to somebody whose name has not been mentioned, who I thought had a really good first half. And that is a guy named Deontay Craig. He generated some really solid pressure, including on that interception. And he's a guy who I think has been a little underwhelming in pass rushing over the last year. It's good to see him really come with energy in that first quarter. And then a heck of a play by Caleb Johnson. Do we talk about his first quarter run that ended up getting called back out of the end zone? I think they said he stepped out inside the 5. I don't even know if he did step out. I know the camera view was right there, but it was a hard play to overturn. They ended up overturning it, handed it right back to him. But that was a really impressive run to set the tone for that first quarter, Don.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I'm proud of Caleb because he really has demonstrated he's a pretty complete back. I guess the one thing we don't know is how well he catches the ball. He didn't have a lot of receptions. Maybe we're saving that for Ohio State.
Last comment here from Mark. He says, 1990 four-way tie for the Big Ten title. Ohio State would have won outright, but they got stopped on 4th down against Michigan. Do you remember that, Don?
I do remember that, of course, because it related to what we were doing at that same time. It was, I think, the decade of the 80s and 90s were 2 of the best decades for the Big Ten. I say that, I guess, because we were part of the story. And I do want to go on the record, Marcus, saying I appreciate your compliment the way that 1990 game went against Michigan, because I know you've seen a lot of football, and I know you can appreciate good football when you see it. Thank you.
Folks, it's been a pleasure here being with you for over 3 hours. If you have not already done so, be sure to check out the social media for the show. We post updates, clips, schedules, all that kind of stuff at From the Hawkeye on X and Instagram, and From the Hawkeye of the Storm on Facebook. Once we hit 1,000 followers on Facebook and Instagram, we'll start doing some giveaways. So be sure, Hawkeye merchandise giveaways. Check it out. Be sure to follow. That's all you got to do is follow on the major social media platforms. And, of course, don't forget, if you've not done so, to – let me find the banner before I start promoting here. Where did it go now? Here it is, Amazon store. If you have not shopped on Amazon with us, this is something I don't promote enough. Very simple to do. Everybody makes Amazon purchases, but if you have our link saved or just click it every time you want to start making Amazon purchases, we'll get a little bit of the proceeds, and it does support the show. And, of course, you can support the show by means of Super Chats or donations, Venmo, Cash App, PayPal, all to be found in the description. The Hawkeyes have a bye week this coming weekend, and then they'll get a shot at the Ohio State Buckeyes in Columbus, possibly a big noon kickoff on Fox. We'll wait and see what the schedule announcement entails. But, Don, hopefully you and I we haven't talked about a potential bye week show, but I know we've done one in the past. You've got a game this Saturday. You're doing a Missouri Valley game this coming Saturday?
I have to do a game in Springfield, Missouri, Youngstown at Missouri State, and I'll be in St. Louis. It's a 2:00 kick, so I'll spend Saturday night in St. Louis. The Missouri Valley's headquartered in St. Louis, so the associate commissioner will be with us, and I'll link up with them on Saturday morning. I'll drive down on Friday night, and then I'll drive back on Sunday. So I will be tied up. I won't have a chance to see much football at all on Saturday. Of course, I'll copy some games and see them on Sunday. So if you want to do a show that would involve any intelligent comment out of me, it probably need to be Sunday night rather than Saturday.
We could even do Monday, Don. We'll talk about that off the air at some point.
Okay.
Because I know people will be, we're back in Sunday night football mode for the NFL. Not that we can't overlap that, but we'll talk about that. I think people would like a bye week show, especially given the game on the schedule next.
Sure.
So,
And I don't know who's scheduled next weekend, but let's face it, there are great games on TV every weekend.
Yeah.
And
the show takes up a lot of time on Saturday, so it's going to be nice to be able to watch some football next week. I know you've got to work, but
yeah, I'll check the schedule, of course, and I'll take the games I want to see, and I'll have a chance to watch them on Sunday.
All right, folks. Thank you to all of our sponsors. And if you have not checked it out, I promised this at the outset, if you've been with us for 3.5 hours, one more plug to our friends over at RTI Threads in the Sioux City area. This is their website right here. It's their homepage, and you can check out all of their NI athletes. They've not just got Hawkeye athletes, but they're partnered with a bunch of athletes across the state of Iowa and even down into Omaha. If you're a big Creighton Blue Jays fan, maybe you're even a Iowa men's basketball fan. They've got deals with Josh Dix, Owen Freeman, Peyton Sandfort. Check it all out. You can just browse all of the NIL partnerships, including pro athlete Cooper DeJean. And it's all awesome. Just check it out, rtithreads.com. They've also got a partnership, I should say, with Iowa baseball. So many ways to support the NIL cause and the Iowa athletes. Again, this is rtithreads.com. The link can be found in our description, and browse their awesome, well-made products from our friends over at RTI Threads in the Sioux City area. All right, Coach, it's been a pleasure. We'll plan on next weekend or Monday, one of those two. We'll work all that out, and maybe we'll talk about a win. I mean, who knows? The crazier things have happened. I mean, 55-24 in 2017 may not be crazier, but it was right up there. I don't think anybody expected a win that day, and certainly nobody expected a 31-point win. So anything's possible.
Here's the trick, Corey. If you play sound defense, if you have a good kicking game, and if you can run the ball, good things might happen for you regardless of who you are.
And how about the opportunity to have a bye going into the most difficult game on the schedule? I know Iowa maybe doesn't have great recent success coming out of bye weeks, but I mean, if you had to pick a time to have a bye, it'd probably be going into this game. And Ohio State has to play a night game on the road leading into this game, and then they get Oregon the week after. So, hey, Iowa should be ready, and may the best team win. They don't have to deal with a C.J. Stroud, Justin Fields. I don't think Will Howard quite brings the same threat from an athleticism standpoint. He's a good quarterback. They have obviously got great skill position players, a great run game, very good defense. But it should be a fun game to preview.
Well, some of my favorite wins have happened in Columbus, Ohio, and that's simply because they're hard to come by. And when you do it it's a great feeling, and I hope our guys on this year's team have that chance to experience what that's like in a couple of weeks. That'd be nice.
I see the comments in the chat. Apparently, Iowa players video chatted Cooper DeJean after the win. So that's cool to see.
Yeah.
A guy that deserved better, I think, from last year's game. All right, folks. For Coach John Patterson, I'm Corey Brada from the Hawkeye of the Storm. You've been watching Iowa Postgame with Coach John Patterson. Enjoy the rest of the weekend. Enjoy Sunday football, NFL football, and we'll talk to you soon.